All right. Welcome to the A's Philosophy YouTube channel. I am A's Philosophy. And tonight we're going to try and get a discussion going. Recently a lot of my channel has been about discussions. A lot of the more educational solo streams are in the playlist, so people can go watch those. A lot of them have to deal with Christian theology and some of them about evolutionary theory and how it's basically definitely wrong. Um, and Tonight we're also going to, we got Charles from the Layman Seminary has joined us. How you doing, Charles? Tonight we're going to do something a little bit different. And by the, Charles, if you have anything to say or comment, I'd be interested in hearing it. But if not, also feel free to just kind of listen, whatever you choose. Um, Tonight we're gonna do something a little bit different. So I have we got Andy in the chat as well. Good to see you. Yeah, usually we talk about Christian theology or theology in general, theism versus atheism, skepticism versus belief, stuff like that. I think this is the first time on this channel I'm going to venture out and try to have a discussion on this particular, general subject, which is politics. I got objective ethics. Yeah. So I have not talked a lot about politics on this channel. Um, but that's not because I don't think it's important. I actually think politics is extremely important. Not in a sort of, party support one party the other kind of way, but just in the idea that as a Christian, I think, part of our responsibility, I think part of Christians' responsibility generally is to try to make this world a better place. And I really don't think you can do that unless you are paying attention to what's going on in society around you and trying to make sure the people leading society and passing laws and making decisions that affect everyone are doing so in such a way that will lead to maximum prosperity, as much prosperity as possible, and as much benefit and basically success for all the members of society as possible. Now, there are a number of Christian denominations, if you want to call them that disagree with me. They think politics is some of the things of this world. It's not important. It's I don't know what. Basically, part of it is just it doesn't matter because Jesus is going to come back and take all of the saints up to heaven and do all that. So whatever we do in this world really doesn't matter because everyone's just waiting for Jesus to come back and rapture everyone and take everyone out. And anything we do down here is just meaningless, and it's all just about waiting for that moment. Okay, well, people have been waiting for 2,000 years now, and we're, in my opinion, we're going to continue waiting for that because if it hasn't happened yet, then after 2,000 years, even in the Book of Revelation, the amount of time that Jesus Christ is supposed to reign is only 1,000 years. So we've already been waiting double that for Jesus to come back. So that tells me that pretty much we absolutely need to make sure that, while we're here, uh, things are as good as possible. And we need to assume that things will continue in their current trajectory until, basically the unexpected happens, if it ever does. So I disagree strongly with Christians who say that we shouldn't, operate in the world and be involved in politics and cultural discussions and things like that. I disagree very strongly. I believe that loving your neighbor requires that people, be invested in the laws that are being passed, be invested in what our political leaders are doing, and whether it's good or bad for humanity. I think if you're not doing those things, you're not following the commandments of Christ. And honestly, I do believe that how people vote or don't vote uh, affects their eternal destination. I think if you vote for an evil person who, basically runs on a campaign that is an open defiance of God's will, you are aligning yourself against God and you will be judged for that, and not positively. I do think that how you vote can send you to hell, essentially. Um, because, when a person runs on a certain platform and tells you what it is he or she believes in and plans to do, uh, you're basically what you vote for is a symbol of basically what you want to do. So if somebody is running on a platform that is in disagreement with God's will, then you have aligned yourself against God by voting for that person. And if you don't vote, then in my opinion, you're basically saying you don't care. And to not care is to basically be in defiance of God as well, because God demands that we, do good works and do what is necessary to basically establish God's kingdom on earth. So not voting is also something that I think God is going to. It's not necessarily about voting, but not being invested in the affairs of society is something that people are going to be judged for negatively, in my opinion. Now that's from a Christian's perspective, but even from a non-Christian perspective, I think it's important that we look into these things because our political leaders their decisions are affecting everyone. So it is necessary to pay attention to what they're doing. It's necessary to be involved. It's necessary to try to affect change in the better direction, whatever that is. So, for Christian denominations that encourage people not to participate in politics, I strongly oppose them. I remember recently, or maybe it wasn't too recently, but I do remember one time that some Jehovah's Witnesses stopped by my door, as they will do, and I learned at that time that the Jehovah's Witnesses are one of these groups of people that tell us, don't vote in political elections, don't be involved in politics, don't even really pay attention to it because it's all meaningless. And to me, that makes the Jehovah's Witnesses and similar groups kind of dangerous because when good people don't, invest themselves in politics and basically make sure that our leaders are good people, then guess who's going to fill that spot? The evil people are. So in my opinion, the evil people are always going to try and rig the system in their favor. And if the good people don't get involved, then the evil, whoever they are or whatever their ideas are, they're eventually going to take control and stamp out the good. So to encourage people who are to not be involved in politics is very dangerous, in my opinion. Not eating shit doesn't mean you aren't hungry. It means you aren't willing to eat shit. Well, the thing is that there are good people out there who are trying, but when you take this, and again, first of all, I come at this from a perspective of I don't really know if what I believe is ultimately true. I don't know for a fact that people who don't vote are condemned by God. But it does seem to me that not voting or not being involved is grounds for being on the wrong side of God's judgment based on my analysis of and what I think God wants based on revelation from Christ and also just thinking about it. And this idea that there's only bad people running it's not true. There are good people, and I think when people take this attitude, all it does is lead to a situation where the good people can't win because everyone's they're all the same. They're all so bad. Then why should I don't at all agree. I think that this is the exact mindset that allows see, look, giant douche or turd sandwich. Exactly. It's that mindset that there's only bad choices that is self-defeating. I think that not being involved leads to that sort of reality where the only choices are people we don't like. Because when people who check out, well, guess what? political office is a mechanism by which greedy people take control of society. What do you think they're going to do? Just not take it? So they're going to try to do everything they can to get in there and grease their own skids. Voting for the lesser of two idiots is still voting for an idiot. Well, again, I think in some elections that may be the case, but think about what you're saying. You're saying that, let's say that there are two idiots running, but one of them is clearly more idiotic than the other. Well, if you don't vote for the better of the two idiots, you're basically saying that you're willing to let society suffer the consequences of allowing the worst guy get in because you didn't want to choose the lesser of two bad people. So if the other guy wins, you're kind of responsible for that, and you're kind of responsible for the extra magnitude of suffering people go through because you didn't want to participate and then at least choose the better of the two. Or better yet, voting for the less blasphemous of two blasphemers is still voting for a blasphemer. Yeah, that's true, but what in our society, I don't see when we have a free and open society with elections where everyone can run. I'm not sure I agree with the assertion that everyone who runs is either a bad person or an idiot or a blasphemer or whatever. I think that, in my opinion, there are good people who run for office, and they have a really hard time winning with the mindset of it doesn't really matter. If we all stopped voting and instead protested for better options, would be better than saying, well, a vote for my idiot kept your idiot from winning. If we all stopped voting and instead protested, well, who's going to implement? All right, so Daniel, let me ask you this: if we protest, who is going to be in charge to implement the changes that we want to be implemented? Don't you understand that that protesting won't matter if the people running society don't care about what your demands are? You have to have people in there who will listen to you and implement the changes. So if you don't vote, then those people aren't going to be there in the first place. Harris versus Trump was literally a no-win situation. I strongly disagree. I think that Trump winning was incredibly beneficial for the United States. Now, I'm not saying he's perfect. How about this? I'm going to drop the link because I did say it was an open discussion. So no one's required to join, but people who do want to join are welcome to do so. It doesn't, all perspectives are welcome. Just follow the generally universally agreed rules. Don't name call. Don't attack people personally. Don't curse too much. Try not to curse at all, preferably. Things like just basically the general conduct rules, and don't say anything that will get me kicked off YouTube. Stuff like that. But I have here some prompts. We don't have to follow these prompts. Hold on one second. It is. Sorry, it's so hot where I am. I turn the cool up a little bit. All right. People, so I see Andy's in the back. I will bring him up in a second. I just want to address some more comments. People running society don't care what your demands are. You are fooling yourself, brother. I rarely talk politics, but I might jump onto this one. I really couldn't disagree more. I really couldn't, Daniel. I think that who we vote and who gets elected makes a huge difference. Oh, before I bring Andy up, sorry, Andy, one sec. I'm going to drop you down for another second. So this is kind of these are the prompts. We don't have to necessarily talk about these prompts, but these are the prompts that I just kind of put up there just to, again, kind of generate ideas. Now, again, if you have something else you want to discuss, we can, related to this overall topic, we can go that way. But here are some topics I think might be interesting. is Donald Trump a good president? So we've already seen a little bit of that. Somebody who doesn't think that that's the case. Economics, capitalism versus socialism, which I think is an interesting one. Conservatism versus liberalism. Is America the greatest country ever? Is it a good country? And other general global issues like the Iran war, and is kind of what I had in mind. A lot of people like to talk about Israel right now. I'm not too interested in that, in what Israel does, like whether Israel's a good or bad country. But a lot of people seem to want to talk about that right now. China, Iran, Europe, what's going on in Europe, stuff like that. Just we'll have to see what people have to say. But Andy, what's up, Andy?
What is going on? How you doing?
I'm doing pretty well, feeling good, and just here we are trying to do my little part in driving people towards truth as I see it. What about you? Got anything on your mind?
No, I like the topic switch up. I'm not super familiar with politics, but maybe at least I can learn.
Oh, that's a good mindset. That's a good mindset. Yeah, so I am someone who follows politics. Yeah. So none of your biz. I know you're catching up. This is definitely says wow. Quite strange topics. This is something. This is something very different. I haven't really gone into this very much recently, but I think it's important just because it's interesting to talk about theology and all these abstracts, but I think politics is kind of where the rubber meets the road. Like, what are we actually going to do with this knowledge that we have about Jesus and the Bible? And so, how are we actually at the end of the day, once we've talked about all this, what are we actually going to do about it? What are the laws going to be after all this? So, and we got let's see here. Eastern Thomas has joined us. So before you go,
Yeah.
Eastern Thomas, one sec. I kind of want to respond to Andy.
Go
I
ahead.
actually do pay close attention to politics. I don't talk about it a lot on this channel, just because I'm usually focused on other things, such as the theology and the Christianity. But like I was saying in my intro, I think that as a Christian, I am required to do whatever to be involved in politics and be aware, because the leaders of our country, not just our country, my country, United States, but all countries, they make decisions that affect everyone, and they pass laws that affect people's lives. So I actually believe that as a Christian, I am required to make sure that do my part to make sure that our society's leaders are the ones who are going to do the best job and do the most benefit for society. So I do kind of look into these things and think about them. So I will just say that. And Thomas, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well today. This is an interesting topic.
Yeah, again, like this is the first time I've kind of delved into politics on this channel. So it'll be I think it's going to be kind of different. We'll kind of see how it goes. We'll kind of see how the interaction goes. I mean, most people who watch my channel watch because we usually talk about theology and things like that. So I'm not sure my audience is really gonna be invested. But again, this is just kind of experimental to see how it goes. I think that all of this is very important. And personally, I think that right now with Donald Trump being president, personally, I'm someone who voted for Donald Trump. I will openly admit that. And if there's someone out there who wants to try to convince me that Donald Trump isn't the good choice, or politics in general is useless, I'm open to hearing those opinions and things like that. I did want to provide those opportunities. But what about you, Thomas? Do you have any hot takes on anything, or just kind of here to just kind of
Yeah, well, I see you're talking about a little bit about economics. I see capitalism versus socialism on the bucket list.
Right.
So I mean, I guess I'll just to kind of take a page at Pope Leo the 13th does talk a little bit about capitalism and socialism and the Catholic views on it. He wrote around the time that the Industrial Revolution was happening. For those who don't know, Pope Leo XIII was the Bishop of Rome in the late 19th century to early 20th century. He's also the first person to be, I think they said he was like the oldest person to be filmed in color with sound. But his opinion was he said, number one, he would say that socialism is wrong. He's socialism, communism, Marxism, it's all wrong. And the reason it's wrong from a Christian standpoint is because man is made in a subsidiary manner. That is to say that every human being is made as an individual with dignity and with a natural end, which ultimately exists to serve the common good. When you have something like Marxism teaches that Marxism teaches that public property or all property and all personhood ought to belong to the state. And Pope Leo essentially said, well, that's wrong because that destroys the subsidiary individual dignity that a man has. It's like you're taking the end of a person or the dignity that God created that person to do, and you're basically rendering that person a product of the state, as opposed to a human being who has a goal and an end created in the image of God. He also says that he's not against capitalism, but he does say that there is a problem with hyper-capitalism. He's very supportive of labor unions because he says one of the things that he says is if you have a society where where it's just free for all, laissez-faire capitalism, then ultimately that ultimately takes away from merit. He says one of the great things in society is the ability to merit and demerit. So the idea is if you work a certain amount of time, you get paid a certain wage for that. And he says when you don't have any restrictions on how much a person can pay another person, like if you have like libertarian economics, then ultimately merit and demerit completely goes away. And one of the things that Pope Leo said was you do want to toe the line between, you don't want to have hyper individualism to where a person is just completely separated from the common good, but you also don't want to have something like with the Marxist manifesto where you have people whose dignity is just completely usurped into the state. And so he says that subsidiary allows a person to have their own individual agency, granted that that individual agency ultimately accommodates the common good. So he uses the example of the family. He says that the family and marriage must precede the state. So like today in America, we have the Obergefell, decision in the Supreme Court, which says, all states must define marriage as not being between just a man and a woman, but also between two men and two women. Well, outside of the fact that that's unnatural, Pope Leo would say the very nature that the state is coming in and trying to define marriage is very problematic because the family precedes the state, and therefore the family is kind of a mini society of its own, helping the common good. And he also compares this to labor unions during the Industrial Revolution. He said that labor unions are a good thing because ultimately they allow people to freely kind of advocate for merit and justice in a society based on the work that they are doing. So that's just kind of the background to where I think his solution is he recommends distributism, which is the idea that private property is a great thing, and private property should be extended to as many people as possible. And so he recommends, he and G.K. Chesterton and Pope Pius XI and Dorothy Day and a few others advocate for having governments that prioritize small businesses over big businesses, They don't advocate for the state coming in and taxing people to death, but they do advocate for the state trying to make it so that people can own as much property as possible. So, like, one thing I think G.K. Chesterton suggests is if somebody is rich and owns 10 mansions, he suggests that the state voluntarily offer that person incentives to own less so that they can give that to someone who, let's say, is poor. They don't advocate for coming in and taking that from them. They advocate through doing that through a voluntary means. But that's one of the things that I know is advocated by a lot of distributists. But that's kind of, the sort of the Catholic view on that.
Wow, there were a lot of areas covered there, and I guess that was just from one particular pope's viewpoints on. It seems to me that hold on, there's a comment here. Donald Trump nuked the global everything. Economics, capitalism is good for mid-development, but cancer late. Socialism is a solution to late-stage capitalism due to its wasteful nature to save costs. Wow. There is a lot wrong in that one individual comment. So congratulations, Chris. It seems to me that popes, I mean, I hate to just kind of say this, popes vary widely on their political stances. It seems to me like the last pope before this current one was very favorable towards communism, whereas you had who is the guy who was pope during Ronald Reagan's presidency?
Pope St. John Paul II.
John Paul II, Pope St. John. So Pope St. John Paul II made it a major focus to combat global communism, and it seems to me like the Pope Francis was very cozy with communist regimes around the globe. So it doesn't seem it seems that popes take their own particular brand of politics into their office at times. Maybe you've noticed that.
Sort of. I would say in regards to, certain political positions which have kind of become entered into the registry of the church, there is what's known as Catholic social teaching. Catholic social teaching is kind of, something that it's essentially the kind of the registry of the Catholic Church's opinions on certain social matters throughout the world. And so, Pope Leo XIII actually established Catholic social teaching because of the Industrial Revolution. Now, over the years, some popes have had varying, views on certain issues. You are right about that. Pope Benedict XVI was a little bit more cozier to democratic socialism than, say, Pope St. John Paul II was. But the Catholic Church, what the Catholic Church does to kind of separate, let's say, the personal views of a pope from, let's say, the official registry of church teaching is through Catholic social teaching. That's kind of the registry that kind of separates what is officially taught or advocated for by the Catholic Church and what is personally taught by the individual pontiff.
Okay. Yeah, I know that liberation theology is very popular in Central and Latin America, and that the Catholic Church has largely embraced it in that area of the world. And liberation theology is essentially Marxism repackaged as basically Catholic theology. So yeah, I do think that there's a wide range of how different Catholics interact with politics. And unfortunately, I hate to say this, as someone who opposes socialism generally, it seems to me like far too many Catholics embrace socialism. And Objective Ethics has joined. I'll get to you in a second. So I just quickly, Thomas, have you observed this, that so many? It seems to me like Catholics are much more likely than let's say Protestants to look at socialism positively, which is surprising to me. And after you respond, I want to see what objective ethics thoughts are on anything. So go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I totally agree with that. I mean, the last few popes have all unanimously opposed liberation theology, but you are right. There are some local pockets of the world, but I don't. In regards to other Christian faiths, I mean, I don't think that's the case. I mean, I would say if you compared your general Catholic priest to, say, an Episcopalian priest, or let's say an ECLA Lutheran priest or priestess or minister or whatever. I mean, I would say compared to kind of the highline denominations, I would say I would say the Catholic priest is probably less likely to be pro-socialism than others. But the Catechism does advocate for a certain level of capitalism in it even today.
Okay. Objective Ethics has joined the panel, and welcome. And maybe provide an introductory remark. Objective Ethics has his own channel. Feel free to plug that. And also, I guess, if you have you can make comments on things that have already been said, or you can kind of voice an opinion that hasn't already been expressed. So go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there just with what's been said already, and I'd like to be able to get through your bullet points. I'm obviously not going to do that all in my opening comment here, and I will as always try to refrain from swearing on your channel because I know you're a Christian channel. I rarely, if ever, swear at people, but I am a sailor and I do swear just as the way I talk. So something might slip out here and there, but I don't mean to be breaking the rules.
Big deal. That's no big deal. Go ahead.
As far as what Thomas said, and I'm not here to attack the brother personally. I actually enjoy Eastern Thomas. We've had some really civil conversations, but when you take these religious views, oftentimes they compel you to bigotry. To make the comment that homosexuality is unnatural just shows an ignorance of science. This is why the Catholic Church itself even says that being homosexual is not the sin, it's engaging in the homosexual activity. Now, I understand that different Catholics are going to take different views on that. Thomas may have a different view. He might be able to cite a pope who has a different view. But even a lot of Protestant churches take the same view. If being gay isn't the sin, it's the act of homosexuality. And the reason is because more and more they're recognizing the science. We don't choose how to be gay. Now, I don't think acting according to your nature is a sin. I don't believe in sin. So I don't think there's anything wrong with being gay, but I could say it's demonstrably true that being gay is perfectly natural. People don't choose to be gay. As far as the capitalism versus socialism he's talking about, these terms get really sticky because you have to define what are you talking about with capitalism, because Ayn Rand's version of capitalism could be seen as laissez-faire, right? It's basically the government should be limited to using force only to restrict force, and that's basically it for the government, and everything else is just free market. And we know that cannot sustain itself. We've seen even in the limited capitalist system that we have right now that people tend to think of, oh, we're capitalist. It's a limited capitalism because we have a lot of socialist government programs. And we try to push a lot of times for more of them, like healthcare, for example, things of this nature, Social Security, et cetera. All the government regulation that comes out of the government is certainly not capitalist. And I think regulation is good. I think regulating the medical industry is extremely important, for example. I think regulating construction is good. The problem with capitalism and socialism both, it's the reason that every political system fails. The one similar thing that causes them all to fail is corruption. So it would be interesting to actually see these systems working without corruption to see which one actually is the best. Because there's a bit of a contradiction in what Thomas said. And again, I'm not trying to attack the brother personally, but when he says that for the betterment of all people, but then he wants to say that socialism isn't good because you become a product of the state. Well, what is a state? A state is a collection of its people. So if you're benefiting the state that you're a part of, well, then you're benefiting all people, and all people are benefited. So to say that somehow is to the detriment of people is just self-refuting. But socialism, I don't think we've seen true socialism in a system that hasn't been affected by corruption. I don't think we've seen a capitalist system that hasn't been affected by corruption. The one thing I would say on the face of it, though, is that laissez-faire capitalism leads to predation, right? There's no restrictions on monopolies, right? There's no restrictions on large corporations. And as having been a successful small business owner myself, I can tell you I was only able to be successful because I was able to compete. And in a totally free capitalist system, I could have been shut out. In fact, there would have been no opportunity for me to build my business from the ground up. It just wouldn't have been possible at this stage so late in the game. Now, hundreds of years ago, or I guess when we started America, a couple 100 years ago, there was certainly more opportunity. But at this point, this late in the game, and it didn't take that long. You think, what Thomas did say that's absolutely spot on is talking about the industrial revolution. And we really need to look at that as a marker because it's extremely important. The evolution of the industrial revolution, and now we're adding the technological revolution onto that, right? These two things combined, things are growing so fast, technologically speaking, and technology grows at an exponential rate, far faster than we can figure out whether or not something is good to do or able to do it, right? Which is why we have problems with global climate change and stuff like that. And I know, A's, last I talked to you about this, I don't think you necessarily believe in that kind of stuff, and that's your right to do that. I'm standing behind what the scientists are saying about it. But that gets us into the politics and corruption. I think one of the things you said is that, well, scientists are lying to people. This is just a scare tactic or whatever, so it gets into this, why are we susceptible to the governments lying to us like this? Same thing that I think religions have done to us. They lie to us. I also don't think that basing our laws and our governments on what is ultimately an invisible guy that nobody can point their finger at and just communicate directly with, and that we're basing that belief on thousands of year old text from ideas that were started in the Bronze Age, mostly written down at the beginning of the Iron Age. And here we are, that was all pre-industrial revolution. I just think this is a terrible idea. You have to be able to change your ideas with new information. And religions require dogmatism, which is something that you fight on this channel all the time. The dogmatism of Paul versus Jesus. And you're absolutely right on your position. In my opinion, I think the evidence is there for anybody who's willing to see it. But people will not see what's right in front of their face because their dogmatic view does not allow them to accept new information. So I'll give up the floor and maybe we can get into some more of this stuff.
Wow, Daniel, you certainly gave us a lot to talk about. And I don't know, Thomas, there was a little bit directed at you. Did you want to respond? Or I certainly have thoughts, and maybe Andy has thoughts as well. Let's start with, because Thomas was kind of called out, let's see if he has anything to say, and then we'll go to Andy if he has anything to say. Thomas, did you have any response?
Yeah, I would say a couple things. First, just to clarify about the homosexuality comment. Again, I'm not speaking specifically when I say homosexuality is unnatural. I would agree with you that homosexual inclinations are not inherently sinful. The Catechism of the Catholic Church does say that homosexual inclinations are disordered, but they don't lay the blame on that to the homosexual individual. Now, you said other stuff. I think there was something else. I'm sorry. I apologize. I forgot what you were saying. You were talking a little bit about some of the economic views on capitalism. Could you repeat your point real quick on that when you were addressing it to me?
I didn't mean to throw so much at you. I didn't know. I thought we were just kind of making an opening thing there or whatever.
No, no, you didn't do it. Daniel, you didn't do anything wrong. I'm just, no, I'm happy because that gives us a lot to talk about. So go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm partly in agreement with you, Thomas, that, there's a balance between laissez-faire capitalism and socialism. I don't know if you worded it specifically like that, but I think you see the dangers in laissez-faire capitalism. So we have to identify when we're talking about capitalism versus socialism, what are we even talking about, right? Are we talking about full-on capitalism? Or are we talking about something that's kind of in the middle? And the other point I mentioned is that I don't think we have a good example of socialism without corruption. I don't think we have an example of capitalism without corruption either, but I think we can look at the two at face value and say, well, do either one of these have any promise?
Yeah. Oh, I remember. I know you were talking about the idea of man's dignity in the state. I remember that. So the clarification I would just want to make there real quick was In regards to the state, when Pope Leo the 13th is writing about the state, he mainly understands the state as an entity or organization that holds power in a society. So he's thinking of governments, monarchies, basically that's kind of what he thinks of when he's writing about a state. So essentially what he tries to say when he says, man's dignity gets usurped into the state, he's not necessarily saying like the will of the society in general, conforms to that. He's more so saying the hierarchy or the people in charge, when they enact certain regulations, when they enact certain regulations, that can lead to the person's dignity being usurped into the state. So take, for example, a tyrant in a society who is, let's say, a king and says, I'm just going to, write laws that are going to benefit me and everybody has to obey those. In that situation, a tyrant is ultimately usurping the end of the individual into his own, kind of goals and his own kind of ideals. So I think that's kind of what Pope Leo was talking about there.
Do you mind if I respond to that real quick, Ace?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think you and I actually, and I always like to find common ground with people in general, but especially with people like yourself, whom I do respect. I do think you're a good human being who's trying the best he can. I don't agree with a lot of things I've heard you say, but we always have respectful disagreements. And the common ground I can find with you here is that I agree that if we throw that X factor of corruption into the equation, then everything becomes a problem. But I think if we just remove the corruption and look at socialism versus laissez-faire capitalism, just pure socialism versus laissez-faire capitalism, I think laissez-faire capitalism is absolutely sets up for predatory or predation, that large corporations, oligarchies, all that can be sustained and promoted, and there's no regulation against it because it's laissez-faire. Whereas if there was no corruption, we wouldn't have the oligarchies. We wouldn't have these tyrants. In socialism. It would be a collective, a forced, or at least a coerced collective action, right? Which I agree with that. But then we say, well, what is that collection representing? Because the idea of a state, ultimately to me as being a thing, I think is a little bit incoherent. A state doesn't become a thing in and of itself unless there is corruption, unless there is a tyrant, unless there is a king or a monarch or something. Otherwise, a state is simply just a way of saying this group of people over here in this particular territory that follows these particular rules. And so ultimately you're talking about those people. Am I missing something there?
No, I think that makes sense.
Andy, did you have any thoughts?
Not a ton. I align pretty closely with what Daniel was saying. As far as like your bullet points go, I would say I probably oppose Donald Trump as a president, and I am opposed to basically all capitalism if there's poverty.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess I'll respond. So for me, it's kind of like Daniel was saying, we have to define our terms. What is capitalism, and what is socialism? To me, social capitalism is best. Actually, I think capitalism is kind of a misnomer. I actually kind of conceive of it as more like the free enterprise system. It's just a system where people can freely engage without some sort of external third party entity trying to manipulate things, which is usually the government. So I think, in a free society that is inherently capitalist or, laissez-faire, I really don't like the idea of the government interfering in people's, freely chosen interactions. I think that in capitalism, yes, inequalities will arise, but that's not a result of the system being, set up for or against any one person. I just think that capital will naturally flow to the people providing the best services and products. So wealth inequality isn't really a problem for me. And also I know that wealth inequality is kind of a lot of times people are poor because of the choices they make in life. And my philosophy is that people should experience the consequences of their own choices, and other people aren't required to basically aren't obligated or required to basically carry the load for them. So I don't. One thing I don't really look at wealth inequality as a marker of whether society is fair or not. I just look at whether the laws establish whether things are free and being done in a way that people are mutually agree on what's happening and not cheating each other. So I don't think that there's any sense in which capitalism is inherently predatory, whether it's laissez-faire capitalism, I don't know, I forget what the terms, extreme capitalism or whatever you want to call it, whereas socialism will inevitably devolve into corruption because it requires there be this hierarchical government structure manipulating the affairs of society, and this is going to be done by humans, which we know are corrupt. So I think that socialism is very problematic, and it deprives people of their personal liberties and is inherently corrupt, whereas capitalism is not. So that's what I would say. That I'm not sure I respond to anything you specifically said, Daniel, but I don't know. Do you have any kind of reaction to what I just said right there, or?
Yeah, and I'm happy to just go around and hear from everybody and stuff. And I know I probably loaded things up, so I'm kind of the focal point, which I'm happy to defend my position here, but I don't want to take over the conversation. But yeah, as far as a couple of things here, when you talked about the competition, and I can't remember exactly how you worded it, the idea of capitalism, or where you have unrestricted competition, right, which is kind of the capitalistic idea. That does fall within laissez-faire capitalism. I tend to think of Ayn Rand when I talk about capitalism, right? And the idea is that the only thing the government should be used for is to basically stop force. So the only one who has any right to force is the government, and the only reason they can execute force is against another entity that's trying to use force. So you have to stop criminals, right? You have laws, so they have to be able to use force against criminals, and they have to be able to have a military in case we get attacked. Other than that, the government literally does nothing. They don't build the roads, they don't do the hospitals, they don't no regulation in anything whatsoever, because in capitalism, the best hospitals will win out ultimately, right? Well, no, not necessarily. The cheapest hospital may win out, and the cheapest hospital may not be the best hospital. They might save the most money on antiseptic by not using it, and whatever, get the later results down the road. But somebody who doesn't have a lot of money doesn't have a lot of choices. The other issue I would have with that is I do believe there is systemic issues when it comes to wealth inequality. So at face value, I don't have a problem with rich people per se. I think people who work hard or come up with good ideas should be rewarded for that. And I have no issue with that whatsoever. However, when we don't have any kind of regulations or stopgaps in place, it's been a long time since I was in college, and I was not an economics major, but I did take one class. One class in economics. And there's something I'm probably not remembering just how it's phrased, but it's a type of basically economic momentum that gets built. So as a company gets larger, right, and it generally is the first guy in the door, they have an opportunity through purchasing power to get their goods and services, their commodities at lower prices because they can buy in volume. And that's how, because of the competition that's set out, everybody is looking to motivate a purchaser. So somebody will say, okay, here's my list price, but if you buy 100 tons of my steel, or if you buy 10,000 units of my whatever, that you need to build your product, I'll give you a discount. And the little guy who might have a great idea and may actually be a good builder or manufacturer or designer, whatever it might be, cannot afford to buy 10,000 units or 1,000 tons of whatever. So he's got to pay the higher price. Well, he has to charge a higher price in order to recover his costs. There's also an issue with distribution of labor. The little guy can't afford to hire as many workers. And the bigger companies can hire more workers. Because they can hire more workers, they have more opportunity. They can afford to pay less wages. So this inequality feeds into itself and to where it gets to be out of control.
Well, here's something I've always thought when I hear these things about how some corporations become too powerful. Think Apple or think Google or think whatever it is, these large, big bad corporations that people talk about as, monopolizing things. Isn't that kind of on the responsibility of the consumer to kind of be aware of what they're doing? And isn't that the solution? It's not necessarily to impose government regulations. Shouldn't the consumers, don't they have an opportunity to say, I don't like how this company's running their affairs, I'm going to go elsewhere to the little guy? Why can't they do that? What's the problem with that?
I think they should. And to be honest with you, however, didn't you yourself say that people are corrupt?
I did say that.
So is it fair to say that we should expect people to make the right decision if they're corrupt?
That's a good point. That's a good point. But again, when people are criticizing a system, to me, when you're looking for reforms, as the socialists in the United States and elsewhere are doing, I often see them complaining about the undue power that these large corporations have accumulated. And yes, it is scary in many cases how much power and influence these corporations have to not just influence society, but stamp out, competition. I don't think the solution is to vote a bunch of politicians to regulate industry. I think it's the collective thing to do would be, let's stop buying products from X company and, move towards this other company, which is maybe not even as good, but just try to give somebody else a chance. This is what I'm talking about. Like, the problem with socialism is that it always seeks to manipulate things through government regulation, whereas true collectivism is done, or I would call it organically. Just let's stop buying Apple products and try this other guy over here. Why don't they ever propose those solutions? Why does it always have to be like a political solution? You know what I'm saying?
I do, and this leads us to I think what ultimately we have to do is come down to principles, because if we don't have an established principle, then whatever we build up from there has nothing that's stable. We're not building on it. We don't have a foundation, right? And that's the problem, is that everybody isn't adopting the same principle. So we can say on principle, yes, this system would be great. However, on principle, it's is irrelevant, because what happens in practice, everybody's not adopting that principle, right? So we have to say, how are we going to get people to sign up to this principle? What's motivating them? And what we find is that people are motivated by fast, what do they call it? They have short attention spans and they want immediate rewards, right? That's what's really motivating people. That's why on YouTube, channels like yours that's trying to actually inform people and educate people, at least have intelligent conversations, respectful conversations, you struggle to get views and subscribers. But if you put a half-naked girl twerking on your videos, you probably get 10,000 subs by tomorrow, right? Because it's meaningless, and that's what's getting clicks. That's the problem that we're at. So I think that we need to look at the ground level and say, how do we build up something that can last? And I think socialism can actually help compensate for the fact that people in general can be very unmotivated to do good things even for themselves, because I don't think a lot of us recognize that when you benefit and you're living your best life, right, that actually can help me live my best life if we are having the same mutual respect for each other. Right. But if we don't recognize that, then it's a dog eat dog world out there.
You're hitting on something that I think is very important. And by the way, Thomas and Andy, feel free to chime in. But I do want to say something. So what I would say is, if based on what I'm hearing, I agree with a lot of what you're saying, is that the ultimate issue with capitalism is that it can be something that creates a very prosperous society, but when people are apathetic, these monopolies tend to form and these unfair situations tend to arise. So in my opinion, when people especially when socialists attack capitalism, they're not actually attacking capitalism exactly. They're attacking they're attacking human nature, which tends toward corruption, which is exactly why I think that Christianity is the solution to all society's problems, because in Christianity, you're obligated, you're basically required by God to do the right thing as you go about your own life, but also as you interact with society. So the motivation is internal, to look for ways to correct these problems that will inevitably arise, even in a free society and a free system. So this is, I mean, I think that this is the key, is that yes, capitalism, in a world where people operate according to sound ethics, can be very effective. The problem is not capitalism itself. The problem is people's moral behavior, and that's what leads to these inequalities and things like that. So that's kind of how I look at it. Thomas, Andy, and Daniel, feel free to respond to that if you have anything to say.
I'd love to
Well,
hear from
I wonder,
yeah,
how
I'd love
do
to
you
hear from you
feel
guys.
how do you feel about a wealth cap, Anthony?
Define wealth cap. I think I know what you mean, but I don't want to assume I know what you mean.
Well, like for individual entities, say no one in the United States is allowed to own more than $100 million worth of property and money.
I would be strongly opposed to that because, in my opinion, as long as someone is acquiring their wealth legitimately, ethically, why should other people basically what is happening there? First of all, there's a number of questions I immediately have, and I think that's a great question, because you can look at a situation like the United States where you have this incredible wealth at the top, and then you have all these homeless camps in all these major cities, and you're thinking to yourself, the system is broken. And maybe one way to fix it is to limit the amount, the hoarding at the top, and then redistribute that wealth. So I see where you're coming from, but there's a number of issues that arise. First of all, how are these people getting so wealthy? A lot of times, if you look at it, they're actually getting wealthy because people are giving them money. Now, they're not just giving them money for no reason; they're paying for products or services or whatever. But as long as people are giving these wealthy executives and CEOs or whoever they are money, who am I to say that they can't take it and keep it and use it for whatever they want? If people don't want those people to have that much money, then stop buying their products, stop paying for what it is they're selling, and do something else with your money. It's that simple. This is probably something that other people are going to weigh in. So that's my initial reaction, and I do want to look into this idea going further. But I just want to make sure that Daniel, did you have anything you wanted to say about the idea of a wealth cap?
No, I'll let Thomas weigh in on that.
Thomas, do you have anything to say about that? Thomas, you're muted, by the way. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I mean, I would just say, generally, I don't think a wealth cap is necessary. I know Pope Leo does make the point that private property, or the right to private property, is something that does belong under natural law. Now, there is the universal destination of goods, which basically says that in times of trouble, in times of trouble, the state can step in to take property if it ultimately affects an emergency situation pertaining to the common good. So, for example, let's say somebody invented the cure to cancer, and they said, well, you have to pay me $1 billion just to inject this cure, and only I own it. Well, in that situation, you could say, well, okay, that cure for cancer could help people in a community, and therefore, it is important that community have access to that. And in that situation, the state could step in and say, okay, we're not going to allow you to hoard this cure. But even then, the Catholic Church would teach that the state wouldn't be forced to, or the person owning the cure wouldn't be forced to hold that for free, or to give it out for free. there would just have to be a price, or a reasonable price, that they would have to charge it for. So I would say, in the same manner, I would say I don't think it's generally necessary. I don't think it rises to the standard of the universal destination of goods to a point where we need, at least today, I would say in 2026 America, to where we need to put a cap on wealth. But I do think that distributism and the distributist policies that people like G.K. Chesterton suggest are a better way to help the poor, because I think under Chesterton's model, he comes up with, I think, a good approach that protects both the ability, the natural right to own private property, with the ability to help the poor through the idea of voluntary incentives in exchange for billionaires and millionaires owning less. So that if a billionaire or a millionaire does give up, let's say, a mansion voluntarily in exchange for, let's say, certain incentives, then that property that they're giving up could then be given to the poor, or could be divided up and given to people that need that. So I don't think it's generally necessary. I don't think it's always 100% immoral, because, again, there could be a time, in years to come, where there's a giant economic drought and half the country is in extreme poverty, and we may need to, if there's one person that has $1 trillion, we may need to divide that up based on the universal destination of goods. But I would say in 2026 America, I don't think that that's necessary. And I think there are other approaches to balance the natural right to private property with the need to help the poor.
And yeah, thank you. I'm the thing is, Thomas, I think you're dabbling in moral relativism there, which is this idea that in America, 2026 is not necessary, but if there's an economic collapse in 2027, then morality kind of see here. Let me kind of formulate another problem I see with the idea of a wealth cap, and this is my problem with redistributive policy, like forced government redistributive policies in general. Let's say that person makes $100 million. Okay, the next the next dollar is going to be, above the cap. So what exactly is going to happen? So what's going to happen is, all right, you got the guy with $100 million. Somebody comes in and pays, let's just say his product is worth $1. Just hypothetically, he sold 100 million whatevers and has that much money still. Somebody comes in, gives him $1 for the next product. Oh, he's over the cap. What is going to happen is that basically you have society has voted that this person has become too rich according to their arbitrary standard. 100 million sounds like a lot, and it is, unless there's hyperinflation, in which case 100 million might not be that much in like Weimar Germany, for instance, or some other. But let's just ignore hyperinflation and things like that. Let's just say $100 million is an incredibly large amount of money, which it is. You have society saying, you know what? You rightfully earn and legitimately earn that 101 millionth dollar, but we're going to take it from you because we think you have too much. What you have just effectively done, in my opinion, collectively as a society, is stolen from that person. And in my opinion, stealing is unethical in all situations. I do not believe in the Robin Hood mentality of steal from the rich, give to the poor. I think that if the rich have the money, then we have to, I think like Thomas was saying, encourage them, incentivize them to be generous with their wealth. But at the same time, if they have earned their wealth, then to take from them their wealth, their private property, without asking them, just taking it from them, that is effectively a violation of their personal sovereignty. It is stealing from them. And I don't believe you can just steal from people just because they have a lot of money, which is, a lot of money is an arbitrarily defined concept in itself. So to me, wealth caps and things like that are to be avoided because they require the state, which again, what is the state? It's basically, in this, democratic socialist mindset, it's a bunch of people voting for these bureaucrats to, make sure things run smoothly in society. we have just democratically elected to steal from that person, because collectively we so we have a majority rule violating the rights of a sovereign individual and his private property, which is inherently unethical. So things like a wealth cap get immediately, I immediately reject them just because I view them as inherently unethical. Whereas owning a lot of money is not inherently unethical, as long as the wealth is generated legitimately and ethically. So that's kind of my initial reaction to something like a wealth cap. But if people want to disagree, feel free to do so. I'm interested in hear if people, have thoughts on that, or if you agree. Maybe I've convinced you.
Well, I'm a moral realist, so I agree with the statement, excuse me, fundamentally that stealing is wrong, right? So we say if you've earned it legitimately, that in and of itself is arbitrary, though what is legitimate? Legitimate means what's legal or what's morally ethical. And so we have to parse all that out. But if we just say, for the sake of argument, that we're all in agreement with what ethical earnings would be, then in my opinion, I'm absolutely on board with that. Is taking something from somebody that's earned it. It's not your property. It's not your right to take it. That's theft. And theft is wrong. Now, there is such a thing as moral equivocation or moral judgments, moral value judgments. So two opposite things cannot be right. That's impossible. It creates a logical contradiction. However, one can be right or they could both be wrong. So we might say, well, it is wrong to steal, but it's also wrong. It's more wrong to starve a family, right? Which is, so like they say, okay, is it wrong to steal? You say objectively it's wrong to steal. And somebody automatically comes back with, well, what if a mother has to steal some bread to feed her children? Well, that's also wrong. It's more wrong to starve a family than it is to steal some bread. Doesn't mean it's right to steal the bread, though.
Okay. So I guess here's the problem that I have with kind of what you're saying, Daniel. And we're almost kind of deviating from a wealth cap specifically, but again, that's not a problem. I'm not saying it's a problem, but it does lead us in this general idea of in my opinion, and let me share my screen again just momentarily here, just so we can remember. When you get to this question of socialism versus capitalism, a big feature of socialist societies is collective ownership of private property. And that would include, in my opinion, personal wealth, especially for the evil 1% or the evil trillionaire class or billionaire class, or whatever you want to call them. The thing about the solutions being proposed by the socialist types, the DSA types, is that they do require theft. It's not just taxation. It's taxation with the intent of taking people's money and giving it to others. This is a huge problem, in my opinion, with their solutions, is that there's nothing inherently unethical about being obscenely wealthy. There is something inherently wealthy about taking people's money without them giving it to you. This is why I can't subscribe to any socialist policies, because they're always advocating for these mandatory redistribution schemes.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, because I don't think that strict socialism is a good idea either. I think a balance between a collectivist and capitalist government would be the most effective, because capitalism does drive competition, and competition drives the improvement of products and services, right? If you don't have that competition, the best product doesn't necessarily come to bear, and the best products and services benefit everybody. So I believe it takes a balance of the two, which is why I don't think you can just say I think it's a false dichotomy to say capitalism or socialism. I think that's actually a black and white fallacy. I think that the answer lies in the middle.
Okay. So I guess I want to ask people, like, what about our current system in America? Do you think it's more capitalist or socialist? Is it a good balance? Is there something that needs to be done as far as speaking strictly of the economic system we have in America, and how it how it affects society at large? What do people think? Is it effective? Is it doing something wrong? Does it need to be improved, or do we need more socialism, less socialism? Does anyone have any idea thoughts on that exactly? I don't know if.
All right, guys.
Yeah, and Daniel, I have appreciated all your thoughts so far. So don't hesitate to. All right, let's take a look at this comment. Maybe Chris can inspire us. What is pennies to them is millions to us. The rich steal from the poor legally by exploitation or loopholes, as well as other things. Objectively speaking, the poor should be more of a priority. I mean, which is more important, starving the 99% of citizens, or is the 1% rights more important here? So, how do people respond to a comment like this? Do we agree with what he's saying? Disagree?
I agree.
You agree with him?
Yeah, I think that, well, if I try to put myself in a billionaire's position, so imagine like a hypothetical, there's in the United States, I'm just making up fictional numbers, but say there's 1 million people out there that are, struggling to find food to feed their family or whatever. And meanwhile, you're sleeping in a mansion with enough money to support yourself for the rest of your life 100 times over, literally. That seems unethical to me. Or if we don't even take it about, like, we think about people working 40, 50, 60 hours a week and barely scraping by, barely having enough money to save anything, while the people at the top are literally doing nothing. They don't even have to work. They have a bunch of people under them doing all of the work, and they just sit back with their arms folded, watching money go in while other people are like struggling to stay alive. But that does seem unethical to me. So I think that he's exactly right. I think that if you have enough money to support yourself for the rest of your life, with food and taxes and cars and, repairs and everything, like, you're set. You don't have anything to worry about. Why does it matter so much that they are allowed to have that money? And I also wanted to add, I don't think that it necessarily requires taking the money from the rich. You could tell them to leave the country or voluntarily surrender the money to the public.
I also think you could put together programs that incentivize giving. Really focus on that. But I think that Andy is absolutely spot on, though. I think it is a greater crime to starve people than it is to have to take somebody has an excessive amount of something, and they're not going to feel it other than the ethics of it, because it is wrong to take things from people that you haven't earned. That is wrong. I'm not going to say it's not, but which is worse, starving somebody, starving children, starving people who physically are disabled and can't work? You know what I mean? At what point do you have to say, well, this is the lesser of two evils? It's okay to look at a situation and say, yeah, both of these are wrong, but one is more wrong than the other one. It is more immoral to hit a puppy with a shovel than it is to steal a candy bar, right? Like we could make judgments between two actions. We don't have to say just because one is less wrong that makes it right. This is the problem I have with the abortion argument. A lot of people say, well, I fight for a woman's choice because it's her body. That doesn't mean I'm in favor of abortion. That's the unfortunate consequence of that. But it is what it is. The most important thing is that, in my opinion, that people have freedom and autonomy, as long as they're not affecting the rights of other people. I don't see a fetus as a people, so therefore I gauge the woman's autonomy to be the priority. I wish there was a different way to go about it. I really do, ideally, but I can't. So you look at the same thing here with this rich. I wish we didn't have to talk about taking rich people's money away from them, because that sucks. But if somebody has, like Andy said, they have enough to live 100 times over, and you've got a starving family out there that you could take money from them or require, you don't have to take it. Like Andy said, you could say, listen, in this country, once you exceed a certain threshold, 50% of your income goes into public programs to help the needy, help the homeless, or whatever it might be. But we have to be very careful, though, because on the flip side of that, we have to be realistic and say, are we incentivizing people to be lazy? Are we encouraging people to throw their lives away on drugs and alcohol because they know that they're going to get a check from the government? We got to be really careful with that.
Yeah. I would also add that it's not only like homelessness, like people are paying, people are in debt, like that they can't escape until death from student loans. People are, hospital bills are hundreds of thousands of dollars sometimes. these things should be affordable.
Yeah, I think if we did put a cap on something and say that money goes to housing, that goes to free hospitals for everybody, that goes to free education. I mean, our country would benefit from making college, at least community college. You could still have your private universities if people want to go that route and want to pay that money, but I think community college level education should be free for everybody, because our entire country would benefit from having more educated people. That's just a fact. Just like we do with the public school system, right? I don't know why we stop it at, what is it, a senior in high school? It should be all the way through a bachelor's in science or a bachelor of arts at a community college. They should be able to get a free education, because we will benefit as a society from having more educated people. Healthcare will benefit as a society in preventative healthcare significantly, right? So on and so forth. Mental health is a huge thing. We would benefit as a society if my neighbor wasn't batshit crazy.
Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing. I honestly, I'm not just saying this. I'm seeing the good intentions, but part of me is concerned because what I'm hearing everyone say, and I don't think this is how you think of it, but this is what I'm seeing as the consequence. You're basically saying that you are willing to violate the rights of the inherent private property rights of these individuals because it will essentially redound to the public benefit. Now, there's no denying that you're right about some of the things you say. If we capped wealth at 100 billion and said every dollar where that goes to, let's just throw it, free hospitals. Okay. There are going to be people who benefit from that, no doubt. There are going to be people who really need a hospital for their health, who are going to benefit from such a. But I don't know. I kind of am hesitant because at the end of the day, what you're saying is, if you're going to violate the rights of one, you're basically dabbling in this morally relativistic scheme where it's just one person and a lot of other people are going to benefit. You're basically violating what I view as a sacred right of a person to own their property, and because it's deemed a public benefit. Well, you can deem a lot of things a public benefit and find all kinds of ideas about why we should take this thing or that from the other person. And another comment I want to make is it's not just about, you see, the thing is, when it comes to conservatives, I think people see conservatives defending the rich and they're like, wow, these people are a bunch of, either they are rich and they're, just protecting themselves, or they're a bunch of bootlickers. And it's really not like that. It's this idea of what is the consequence of an idea like that? The consequence is society is essentially saying to itself that the rights of the individual can be violated for the benefit of the greater whole. And I think it's a very dangerous idea because every single person on this earth has essential rights as a human being that are not subject to political manipulation. So when we think about things, I do think it's important to kind of think about the secondary consequences, not necessarily that the intent isn't right, but what is the logical, philosophical, ethical consequence of enacting a policy like this? And something that has to be put on the table is that you are indeed saying that the rights of the individual are trumped by what is seen as beneficial for the whole. Does that not seem dangerous?
No, I don't think it has to be that way. I think Andy actually provided the solution to that. If a person could afford to live 100 lifetimes over, right? The Elon Musk, the Bill Gates, whatever, and there's a lot of people who have more than enough money. They could absolutely afford to live anywhere they choose. They're not forced to give up their money. You're not actually taking it from them. You're giving them an option. And if the rules are laid out from the beginning and everybody agrees to play the game, there is no coercion. So you're not actually.
I would live in a communist society if everyone was in agreement of what the rules are. I think that's just rarely the case. I think there's a lot of people out there who look at the socialists and the schemes they're proposing and say, either I don't want to participate in that, or I don't think it's going to work. And it's basically, well, it's the law now. Too bad, so sad. You know, if you I forget what the current tax bracket is, but I know that if you make around like $500,000 a year, and honestly, I don't believe there's anyone who's doing nothing. And if they are in a situation where they just have a bunch of underlings, it's not because they. Very rarely is it because people started that way. They probably spent much of their lives building them into that situation, and they deserve to kind of just be in a managerial position where things are delegated to other people. You're seeing like 30% of your income just disappear before right out of the check. And and you don't have you're one person, but there were, all these people who don't have as much money as you do voting against you, and you can't defend yourself because it's just mob rule. I think it's part of the problem with even though the socialists have good intentions, I truly believe that a lot of them do. I think a lot of them are just corrupt, and it's just an easy way to win elections is promise free things. But even the ones with good intentions have to understand that the mandatory involuntary nature of things is very problematic, and it's hard to avoid. I don't know if anyone wants to respond to anything I just said right there.
Well, I think those people just represent such a minority of the population. It's like, who cares? Like, if they're being violated, like it's for the greater good of 300 million people.
Honestly, I respect you, Andy, but I think it's a very dangerous way of thinking because, I mean, let's just go back to something that was already mentioned during the course of the homosexuals. There are only 3 to 5% of the population. I know people are going to disagree about that number. Let's just for the sake of argument, let's just say it's 3%. Who cares about gay marriage when only 3% of the population is going to, let's just, society has always been this way. We've done things this way for thousands of years. Just ignore them. It's almost along those same lines. I'm not trying to be, directly challenge, your personal ethics. I'm just trying to get you to see how this idea of there aren't that many of them, so who cares what they think? I think that can lead to a lot of problems in a lot of different areas.
Well, I didn't really want to get into the whole homosexual thing. I only brought it up because Thomas had said something that I wanted to address it specifically. So I'm going to address what you said specifically, but I really prefer to focus on that. Should be a whole topic in and of itself, because I think there's a lot of unpacking to do, because I'm hearing a lot of stuff that I see as being dangerous. We talk about objective morality, and objective morality in any system you're talking about. We want to avoid corruption. It requires justice. And a necessary precondition of justice is fairness. And fairness is based on treating like cases alike. So any consensual adults, any adults should be able to engage in consensual behavior. And if there is a marriage or a sexual relationship or whatever, it's no other adult's position to judge them or tell them or prohibit them from doing that. They're consenting adults. You would not want people to tell you who you have to marry. As a person who thinks a man should only marry a woman, which is what I'm assuming you're positing here, you're fine with saying, hey, men should only marry women, but you wouldn't want that to go a step further and have them tell you what woman to marry. You'd be like, oh, absolutely not. So you're only willing to infringe on other people's rights up to a certain degree. Well, I say no. You're an adult. You should have a right to not get married at all if you don't want to, or marry whomever you want to. That's just fair, and it should be the same for all people. So on a fundamental level, if we're going to talk about justice and fairness, there's no argument to be made against homosexuality. Now, if you want to make a religious argument or something like that, that's a different conversation. But on the basis of fairness and justice, that's a non-starter.
That's an interesting, I see what you're saying. I especially when it comes to this, perhaps is best reserved for a different conversation. Maybe we'll just leave it at that, because I think maybe I will have a stream where that will be a specific focus, because again, I do remember when you were addressing Thomas, you did say, Daniel, and again, I see the intention of I have had a little bit. I have had a significant evolution in my view on this. In that, when I did first start thinking about these, I did kind of, and again, this is how I used to think, not how I think now. I did kind of think of homosexuals as being inherently like basically just morally not basically having a moral deficiency. But I no longer think that way. But I will say that I also have not come to a place where I think that opposing, I don't know if you want to call it liberalizing society, sexual. I don't think that's rooted in bigotry. I don't think it's rooted in hating them. I do think that there's an argument that there is an inherent nature to how humans were designed, and humans should respect that. So, I do often hear this being framed as, arguments against hatred, arguments against bigotry. Like, I really do not hate homosexuals, but at the same time, I believe that marriage is a specifically defined thing, and it's not for humans to try to manipulate that and change that, because of how we feel. So I guess we can kind of move on this a little bit. If you want to respond to what I've just said.
Yeah, I do. I do want to talk about this again at a future date because I think there is a lot to unpack there. And I also want to give Andy a chance because I kind of jumped on his toes there and I didn't mean to, but I was mid-sentence before I realized he was talking, and I'd like to hear what the brother has to say. But just let me just say two things to that. One, I want to give you your flowers for making a step in towards, I guess we'll call it my direction or whatever you want to say, away from your previous thought, because that shows a lot of who you are as a human being, right? I may not agree with where you're at right now, but I can definitely commend you for taking a step in my direction. And I'm really, that should be commended. And I think more people, we all need to be willing to do that, right? We all need to look at where we're at and say, you know what, maybe I can. I don't have to go all the way over there, but maybe I can take a step that direction because everything I'm thinking isn't necessarily justifiable. So I really commend you for that, just at face value. I'd also like to clarify that bigotry doesn't involve hatred. Specifically, it can lead to hatred, but bigotry is about judgment, right? That's really what it's about. It's not, I don't think Thomist hates anybody. When I said bigotry, I don't think the brother hates anybody. I don't think he has a hateful bone in his body. Now, I don't know Thomist, but I've had a few conversations with him. He seems like a good human being. I'm sure he would be a great neighbor, right? Despite our differences. And I'd say the same thing about you, Ace. I don't think you're a hateful person, but I do see bigotry here because it's about judgment. And I know these words get thrown around as weapons, and I'm not trying to do that. The final thing I will say, if I may, and I'll turn it over to Andy here, is that my wife and I got married, and because of my childhood, one of the first things that I talked to with my wife when we decided to get married, I said, I do not want to have children until we own a house, because I want to make sure that we have shown enough stability as a couple that we can provide a good life to a child. And I speak out against people having large families because they're not taking care of the kids that they're having, financially, emotionally, mentally, whatever. And I really think that's a problem. I think that there's this thing called antinatalism, right? And I'm not an antinatalist. I don't think it's fundamentally unethical to have children, but I do think it's unethical to have large families because of the burden on the environment. I think it's unethical to have any children that you cannot support. So because my wife and I did what I believe is the ethical decision to wait, by the time we actually got my wife's always been very responsible, so I'll just be honest about it. By the time I got my shit together to where I could be a good father, a stable husband, and a good father, it was too late for us to think about having kids at that point, right? So did we go against our nature because we intentionally chose not to have children? Do you view us as having done the same in the same way you would view a homosexual couple being together?
No, I think your nature is to use your free will for the benefit of yourself and of society. I think you did exactly the right thing. I think that humans have basically their free will to basically examine their circumstances and say, can I bear a child? Okay. And take care of it. And if you can't take care of the child, then you're bringing a human being into the world who's going to suffer. All right. So I actually really am, like you said, I give due respect to you as well, because I've actually had one time I was speaking with somebody I was familiar with, and I did make the comment that I don't think people should have more kids than they should be able to support. And boy, did that other person not like that comment and really let me have it and said, oh, basically it was wrapped up in but basically the idea is, that's an oppressive idea. That's an unrealistic idea. That's an idea that is, I could say basically very negatively and also strongly worded. And also, I hate to say it, there was a little bit of racial element involved. From the perspective of the other person. I was just like, I thought it was just a common sense thing that I was saying. But this other person, I guess you never know how another person's going to react. But I hate to say this, my mind wasn't changed. Like, I still, to this day, don't think what I said was wrong. I think it's right. And basically, I guess I'm kind of going off on a tangent here. But at the end of the day, when we say nature, yes, humans are by nature designed to reproduce. Okay. But we also have within ourselves the capacity to make sure we're doing so in a way that leads to prosperity. So I think you did the right thing essentially in that case.
Well, I agree, and I think that we could tie this to the homosexual relationship too. My nature was to have a relationship, a permanent bond with my wife, and to make a permanent commitment with the person who I love and who I wanted to build a life together with. Our purpose of getting married was never around having a family. That was something we would only consider if we felt like we were both in a position to do so. But from the get-go, the reason that we decided to get married had absolutely nothing to do with building a family together. And the same thing can be said for a homosexual couple. The other thing that can be said for a homosexual couple is we have a lot of children that are in need of a good home. And a good home consists of two parents in the household. There's no studies that are worldwide studies that are accepted that say this has to be a man and a woman, or it has to be your biological parents. All the studies are saying two-parent households are the most successful households, and that could be any two functional adults. And two gay people or two bi people or two whatever can be functional and oftentimes are more functional than heterosexual people, frankly. So there's nothing about being gay that's going to make you less functional as a parent or as an adult. The idea that a child needs to grow up around a man and a woman is nonsensical. Men and women can share and exchange qualities. There are sensitive men and there are strong women. So I don't buy into the gender roles. And so I just think I know we're not trying to divulge into this whole thing, but I would really like to challenge you on your personal time. And maybe I would love to get into a video and then have a conversation with you about these things, because I think if you map on what you said is okay and perfectly ethical for my wife and I, can literally be just mapped right onto a homosexual couple if you leave the religion and the dogmatism and the politics out of it. And we just look at it at what I was talking about, like cases alike. And I think that's the most fundamental argument I can make in favor of gay marriage. And I'll let Andy, and I know I said I was going to let you talk like 10 minutes ago, brother. I'm so sorry about that.
That's okay. I only wanted to say to Anthony, your point about restricting gay people from being married versus allowing billionaires to have unlimited money. The difference, in my opinion, I don't think it's an equal analogy, because homosexuals being married is not to the detriment of, millions of people, whereas billionaires being allowed to own unlimited money is to the detriment of millions of people.
Is it see, here's the thing. I think one of the reasons, let me, and oh, by the way, objective, like, absolutely, we can have a conversation about that. Maybe I think it looks to me like this is a fruitful area for discussion. So maybe I'll have a stream about that, kind of with that as being one of the particular focuses. And if I have a future politics, culture, and society, live stream, that I'll put LGBTQ issues as one of the topics, and we can specifically focus on that.
Yeah, don't do it next Saturday, because Andy and I are not going to be available. We have a show next Saturday, and don't do it the Saturday after, because I will
Saturday or Sunday.
Well, I do my stream on Sundays, but I'm done usually by this time in the evening. So
okay.
Yeah, Sunday evening would be great, but I know sometimes you go different days of the week, but I have the next two Saturdays. I'm definitely booked, and I've called Andy, so you can't take him away from me for next Saturday. He's mine. So yeah. other than that, I'd love to be a part of that conversation, Ace, and I'd like to actually maybe invite a couple people, as long as I could bring some people who can keep their composure, because I don't want to. You and I always have very productive conversations despite our differences, and I want to. It's a great platform. This conversation has been really great, just in everything we're talking about. And how often do you see people have differences of opinions about anything we've discussed and maintain their composure and civility? So I'd like to be part of something like that again.
Yeah, that actually does remind me of something of when I was on I was on one of your panels a couple weeks ago, and I do want to honestly apologize because that individual Nell, looking back on it, I understand like what I was honestly not trying to say, intentionally trying to be offensive. But looking back on that, I think my responses were absolutely a little bit too blunt, and it was bordering on inappropriate. And I just that was not my intention. So,
Well, the best. No, I respect you for saying that, and I know they do as well. They would appreciate that, and yeah, if you ever run across them again, I'm sure she would appreciate that. But the credit, see, the nice thing about it is that I make mistakes. I have a habit, and I think it's a good habit, but it's a habit that's got me in trouble a lot. Is that when I went through, especially when I was incarcerated, I got along really well with everybody. And the Black community, I was playing basketball and doing sports and hitting the weights and stuff. And I hung out with as many colored people as white people, not because I have a problem with my own color of my own skin, but just because I just got along with everybody. And so everybody started calling me family because it was brother, sister, family, right? And so I have adopted that, and I call people brother, sister, family all the time, as you know. And a friend of mine who I've interacted with on the internet, their preferred pronouns are they, them. And I've like 2 or 3 times said, "Hey, brother, it's so great to see you," even though it's written on the screen, they, them. And I've had to in public, I've had to "Oh, I'm so sorry." And they have never corrected me on it. They've never given me a hard time about it. They totally understand I'm a 50-year-old man who doesn't mean any harm. I'm my own worst enemy. You know what I mean? So Nell, I would say the same thing. I think that she just said, "Hey, listen, this guy, he's got a right to his view. I don't appreciate it, and maybe, and she's a good human being as far as that goes." And so I do think that because the people we're talking to are gracious, and I don't think that you had malicious intentions, and I think that was recognizable. So I appreciate that you respect, that you identify it, because I did the same thing. I was like, "Oh my gosh, RP, I'm so embarrassed that I just did that. I think I've done it like 3 times to you tonight." And they just laughed about it and said, "Don't worry about it at all," But so a lot of it has to do with how it's being received. But I do have an issue with that people are looking to be offended sometimes. You know what I mean? That's one of the problems I have with the people on the far left. And I'm in the middle, so I can criticize both sides. I think people on the far left are really looking for things to be offended by sometimes, as opposed to just saying some of this stuff is extreme, it's different, we're progressive. That's the whole point about being progressive, right? Is we're pushing against the standard quo, or the status quo. And so with that, you have to give people time to change their ideas. I feel like the solution to a huge solution to a lot of the stuff with the gender situation is just having bathrooms be gender neutral. And so many people on both sides have vilified me for making that statement. Like, how can you possibly say that? Both sides are upset about it. And if you just step back from the situation long enough to realize that if you have a functional system, if you have one big bathroom that's gender neutral with no front door on it, it's just got a little short wall, so you can't just look right in from the hallway and see what's going on. And then you have a couple of private single-use bathrooms for people who really can't adjust to that. You've solved the problem. Honestly, the people who want to go to the bathroom just want to go to the bathroom. They're not in there trying to look and see who's doing what and got what in their pants, And if people are that bent out about it, they could use a private bathroom with a locking door, with a changing table for the baby and all that stuff. Problem solved, in my opinion. But both the left and the right got so upset at me for suggesting. The right said, "How can you possibly say that transgender women should be in the same bathroom as women?" And the people on the left were saying, "How can you possibly say that transgender women should have to bow down to anybody? And why can't they just use the women's?" It's like, oh my God, you can't please anybody, because people are not looking for solutions. They're looking to be offended.
Yeah, so I guess I do think that at some point, let's I would like to have this conversation with you about LGBTQ issues, and I'm not sure when that will take place. Honestly, recently Sundays have been my go-to, Sunday nights, but that's just kind of been coincidental. Sometimes, but I will maybe post it a little bit beforehand, so if you're available, you can see it. And I'm interested in hearing your views. And I will say this though, I'm not gonna shy away from the fact that I still am decidedly in the more conservative realm of beliefs on these topics. So you're gonna want to bring, if you do bring other people, bring people who are at least willing to engage with someone who doesn't see things the way they do. And I know that it touches on deep issues within their personality and their belief. And if they're capable of engaging with someone like me, then they're welcome. Okay, I'll put it that way. So
That's no problem at all.
yeah. But I also am finding this conversation about basically just generally the idea of wealth inequality and how to deal with it. Let's kind of reshift back to that for the time being. Here's my thing. I hear a lot of people complaining about America. And one of the things that I think is proof to me that America is such a great country is that we're having conversations about how to control the immense amount of wealth that people are able to accumulate in our system. And I think that that's a testament to how incredibly well established and founded our country is. And I think that the country's foundations are decidedly, when you look at the original, the founding fathers, whoever the people, they were decidedly capitalists. And when you look at socialist countries around the world, they haven't really fared all that well. So maybe that's a sign that at the end of the day, capitalism is the best system. I don't know how we could. Maybe people have thoughts on that, or
Well, maybe if you're opposed to a wealth cap, maybe you would be in favor of making billionaires and 100 millionaires pay equal taxes.
pay equal taxes. So again, I think it's pretty clear what you mean, but I don't want to assume. So please just kind of fully flesh out what you mean by pay equal taxes.
Well, I mean, like a third, for instance, like depending on how you have your taxes set up, say a third of your money gets taken out. I think it's like a much smaller percentage for billionaires than it is for the average person.
All right. This is where we can actually get to some facts. So this is good. It's good you brought this up, because now we can talk about what are the actual facts as opposed to these kind of abstract ideas. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to show you the current U.S. tax bracket. Hold on one second. So when you file your taxes every year, every single person in the United States, whether you're a trillionaire, there are no trillionaires, whether you're a billionaire or anything in between, you're going to pay an individual tax rate. And so the tax rate is based on the tax bracket, which is based on how much income you make. So this is the IRS website. See the IRS up here, 2025 rate. So this was a tax rate for last year. So the last year that people paid taxes, it just people just finished paying in April if you did it the right way. So if you make $0, can everyone see the screen? Let's see if I can.
Yeah.
If you make $0 to 11,925, you pay 10%. If you make over 11,925, so if you make 11,926 to 48,475, the tax rate at that income level is 12%. So let's say you make $11,925 exactly, you pay 10%. If you make $11,926, you pay 10% on everything up to $11,925, and you pay 12% on that last dollar. So you would pay 12 cents for that $1. Now, let's say you make up to 48,475. So the income you generated from this range would be taxed at 12%. Everything below 11,925 is taxed at 0%. So when you get over $48,475, it jumps to 22%. All right, so everybody makes over $48,476 is taxed at 22%. That's universal. Doesn't matter who you are, what you do, or how you made the money. That's just so it jumps to 22% over 48,475. If you make $626,000, $626,351 and up, that
I do
income-
apologize, but I do have to duck out, guys. Talk to you
Okay,
soon.
Thomas, it was as usual. I was glad to have you. You had some important contributions, and
Thank you.
I hope it didn't. You weren't talking all that much. I hope you did. You feel frozen out? I didn't want to.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Okay.
Not at all. I just want to
Well,
let other people speak.
Did you want to plug your channel before you go?
Yeah,
or
sure.
anything?
My channel is Eastern Thomas. I have a live stream every Friday. It's an open panel, so anybody can come in and join. It's at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
All right, everyone,
Great.
go to Eastern Thomas channel, subscribe.
Appreciate the conversation as always, Thomas.
All right, so going back to our conversation, if you make over $626,350, $350,000. Hold on, let me try to say this right. $626,350. You are going to be paying a marginal tax rate of 37%. So that is well over 1/3, or it's not well over, but it is over 1/3. So millionaires, people who make $1 million in a year, do actually already pay more than 1/3 of that income that they're making over that amount. And you can see that it jumps to 32% right here. This is you start paying that at 197,000. So you're paying basically a third of your income over $197,000. So
Yes.
So that applies to Elon Musk. That applies to Donald Trump. That applies to every single person who makes more than that amount of money.
I see what you're saying. I think maybe I was mistaken. I think I'm thinking about like incentives and stuff that were given.
I think what you're. Let me go ahead.
Go ahead. All right. Well, I think that this is kind of a messed up system in itself, though, because like, why does it end at 37%? Like, why doesn't it go to 40% for $1 million and 45% for 10 million or whatever? And and all the way up to 300% if it needs to.
Well, 300%
or 100%. Sorry, yeah, I was thinking in different terms. 100% if it needs to.
The thing is, I think it should stop at 10%. I think it should be 10% no matter. I think if you make $1 billion, everyone should pay the same rate. Like, I think that's what's fair. If you think about this,
that's my view too. I agree. Everyone should pay the same rate.
Okay, well, people who are paying a people who make large amounts of money are paying a much higher rate than people who are not making. And by the way, are you familiar with what a standard deduction is?
No.
Okay, a standard deduction is basically it's a little bit hard to explain, but let's say you make $50,000. Believe it or not, when people are filing their taxes, again, this applies to every single person who files taxes. So basically theoretically every single American. I guess a working American is the right way to put it. Let's say you make $50,000. The government has, when you're doing your taxes, the government has instituted what's called a standard deduction. You can look this up. Standard deduction is an amount that you can just literally subtract off the total amount just for whatever reason. Which sounds strange. Like, why would they do that? Well, they have their reasons. But let's say you make $50,000. Hold on. Let me look up. I can't remember what the current standard deduction is.
Well, the simplest way to put it is it's a tax credit per dependent, per household. So it's based on your household. It's however many number of dependents. It's not based on how many people are working. So every dependent gets, let's say, a flat $1,500 tax credit. So that's going to come off of the income of whoever's bringing in the money. So if you have a wife and 2 kids and you're the only one working, you make $50,000. You've got $6,000 in earned income tax credit that you get to take off of your income prior to filing your taxes. It's the simplest way to
Exactly, exactly. And essentially, I'm just going to read off the IRS website here. The standard deduction for a single filer in 2020, the last year was 15,000, and for married couples is 32,200. So if you're a single, let's say somebody is single and you made $50,000, you really, as far as the government is concerned and your taxes, you only made $35,000. And then you would look on this chart, and to figure out what your taxes are, you would say, well, I made $35,000. Let's 50,000 minus 15,000, just to round the numbers, basically. And so you're falling in this 12%. So 0 to 11,925 would be taxed at 10%, and then 11,926 to 35,000 would be taxed at 12%. And you could easily calculate your taxes from those numbers. So that is how. So basically, Andy, the point is we do currently exist in what's called a progressive tax system, which is that the more money you make, the more you're taxed. There's just anyone who claims otherwise is not telling the truth.
That's not true. That's not true. Because someone that makes 650,000 is paying the same rate as someone that makes 100 billion, and the person that's making 100 billion should be. I mean, in my opinion, this whole entire system of like different tax brackets is bullshit. Everybody should pay the same percent regardless. But if we're going to entertain a tax bracket system, then billionaires should pay way more, not just like the same rate as the highest bracket, which is nothing. I mean, these are numbers to these people. Like, it's not even, it doesn't
Wait,
affect
so
their
wait a
life.
minute. First of all, people don't really make, I guess there are a couple people who make, so basically, if you make $626,000 a year, you are filthy rich. I mean,
Yeah.
very few people just like literally make, I think the number of people who make $1 billion a year is like 10 people on earth, like literally. Not many people actually make like superstar athletes make more than $1 million a year. The highest paid corporate CEOs make more than, but 99.9% of people don't make $1 million a year. They might have $1 million in their bank account.
Well, yeah, but we're specifically addressing the 1%. Like these people are making, hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars per day.
That's way more than that's like the 0.0001%. Like we're talking a very small number of people make that much. But I think you have an exaggerated idea of like how much people at the top are making. Like I think that the number of people making $1 million a year is very, it's not 1% of the country. Like I'm just gonna do a quick internet search right. What percent?
I'd be surprised if it was less than 3%, if not more like 5%.
So I'm just going to type in what percent make more than $1 million a year in the United States. And the number I'm getting from Search Assist is less than 0.5%, which was higher than I thought, actually. Wow. I thought it was going to be less than 0.1%, but less than 0.5% of American households earn more. So we're not talking about how much money they have. We're talking about how much money they earn annually. And apparently that is 1/2 of 1%. Let me see if I can get some more.
I mean, that's still millions of people, though. You know what I mean? Millions of people with billions of dollars each.
So this is a Yahoo article from 2025. So it's actually from Realtor.com. The number of Americans earning at least $1 million a year has more than doubled in a decade. But these seven, let's see if I can actually find the number. So this is the number that Realtor.com came up with last year. The actual number of people who make $1 million in the United States is 800,000 people out of 300 million.
That make more than $1 million?
Yeah, let me share my screen. Is my screen already shared actually? I think it is. Okay.
I see it now.
All right, so this is from, let's zoom in here. Record number of Americans earn 1 million. So this is yahoo.com, but I think they borrowed it from realtor.com. And this is from last year, about a year ago, 2025. And the number of Americans that earning at least $1 million a year has more than doubled in a decade. But these seven-figure households are far more evenly spread, with coastal states claiming the biggest share. Yahoo recently examined the latest available income. Okay, so it is a Yahoo article. I don't know. I guess that was just an ad or something. But anyway, to get down here, the analysis revealed that nationally, roughly 800,000 taxpayers pay $1 million or more. So out of 300 million Americans, there are 800,000 people who make $1 million or more, and that's actually a lot. That's kind of more than I thought. But that number was only 470,000 in 2013. Notably, even that higher figure accounts for roughly 0.5% of the 153 million income tax return. So 153 million Americans filed tax incomes. Roughly, that was in 2022, but 3 years difference. It's not going to be that different. And of those 153 million income tax returns, 800,000 make more than $1 million a year. So it is a small percentage. Now, it's a lot of people. 800,000 is a lot, but not even 1 million Americans. And America is one of the most wealthiest countries on earth. And you can see there's a chart down here that, believe it or not, wait, let me see if I can go find that chart. Look at all these liberal Democrat states where that have that. So Connecticut, very liberal Democrat state. Massachusetts, New York, one of the most. Okay, Florida's got Republicans in there. California, New Jersey, and actually, believe it or not, look at Washington, Democrat run. Nevada, Texas. Okay, Texas makes sense. But actually, these are states, and I know that Washington, D.C. is actually the highest of all, because it's not counted just because it's not an actual state. But let me see. Among all 50 states, so D.C., I know people can't really see this. I'm going to try and zoom in even more. That's not going to work. I know people are going to have a hard time seeing it, but if you look at that screen right there, you see Connecticut is at 89. So basically the number, that number represents the highest earnings in what is that number even figure? Concentration. So I think that's hold on, give me a second here. Biggest share, 90. Oh, boasting close to 90 million tax per. So this is the percentage, the ratio, the number of $1 million earners per 10,000 filers. So this is a concentration of wealth, and we can see that states like West Virginia, 16.4 per 10,000. So these conservative Republican states are actually the lowest. But you look at New York, 71.4, many times higher than West Virginia. Massachusetts, massive, 76. Connecticut is the highest of the states. Look at DC though, 158 per 10,000. I mean, so this is what happens when you send all the money to Washington and they keep it for themselves. This is why conservatives don't like sending all the money in the tax money, because you have all these great ideas. Guess what? All the richest people live in DC. DC is ridiculously wealthy. I mean, I don't want to give away where I live. I live pretty close to DC, and it is unbelievable the amount of wealth people have around here. It's just insane, more than anyone can comprehend, because all the tax money's flowing here. All this, all the good ideas that people have about how they want to run society. These people a lot of them are pocketing the money. This is why Donald Trump got elected. One of the reasons, because people, especially these people, are just so freaking rolling in the money. But anyways, what I'm trying to point out here is, and I'm not trying to get explicitly political, but all of these liberal, Democrat run, they're the ones that have the highest income inequality. It's the Republican states largely. I mean, you got Florida, you got Texas way up there. But I guess kind of Wyoming's a little bit surprising. I wouldn't have expected that. But, Washington, California, New York, Connecticut, New Jersey, I think these might be a surprise to people. about how many wealthy people live in these kind of these limousine liberals. I don't know. I maybe I shouldn't go into party politics. I just think it's interesting.
No,
I just
these
think
are. It's only funny that you say I don't want to get too political, but your whole show is.
yeah. Well, party politics, like political, is more like debating political ideas versus like, oh, the Democrats are so bad, the Republicans are so bad. Like like that's kind of just like the. It's more. I would rather debate ideas as opposed to like just like this like team
Identity
sports.
politics.
Yeah. Like, well, just like team sports. Like I really do think there are a lot of people in this country on both sides who are like, my team's the Democrat. It's like Cowboys and Redskins or Red Sox and Yankees. It's like, I'm on this team, you're on that team. Let's just beat. I don't think like that. I just, I would vote for a Democrat if I thought that, that was the best person for the job. I just haven't felt that way in a long time. And I'm sure that, if y'all were to vote, I'm not sure, I'm not asking you to reveal it whether you do or not, but, I would hope that if a Republican came around that was clearly better than the Democrat, well, I don't want to go there anyways, we came here. Remember, we came here. We want to find out how many people make, and you got 800,000 people. So think about how many of that is just made up by high-paid athletes, who are, by the way, not generally, Caucasian. Your stereotypical white, corporate CEO guy that just rigs the system in his favor. You got movie stars in there. You got talk show hosts. There's a lot of people in this number. You can probably get up to like 100,000 people in this number who are not your financial institution. What do they call them? Those stock company type things. Elon Musk. There's a lot of people in here who aren't part of some rigged game system that are just making $1 million or more that people want to complain about America. So,
I mean, it's people making $1 million aren't really what I'm concerned about. Like that's nothing compared to people that are earning people that are not only earning billions per year, but have, tens to hundreds of billions in their bank, hoarding that money or keeping it locked up in, businesses or something to get themselves more money, when they should be like, that money should be distributing in our economy. It should be, going to pay for people like Daniel was saying, like it's in our best interests to make sure that people have free education, because having a country full of educated people is going to lead to us making better choices for ourselves. So like free education, that money could go towards free education. I live in Michigan, for example. The roads are shit everywhere you go in Michigan, and nobody can afford to fix them. Like people are being taken advantage of for their medical conditions. There should be no cost for that from the individual, in my opinion. And so these are problems. Like people are dying, people are starving, and that could be solved by these people being taxed more.
Again, there's a couple things I want to say to that. First of all, which is that unfortunately, a lot of times the reason people are poor is because of choices they make in their own life. So I think that even when it comes to healthcare, and let's take something like cancer. I mean, everyone hates cancer, but one of the facts of life is that people don't understand a lot of types of cancer. Like I've heard as much, even a majority of cancer cases are a direct result of how people choose to live their lives. And if they were to do things differently, then they wouldn't have gotten cancer. And we can think of a couple examples. For instance, smoking is likely to cause lung cancer. Well, Elon Musk didn't cause people to smoke and get lung cancer. Why should we take money from him forcibly against his will? And I understand, but here's the thing: the tax code it doesn't give you a choice. So at the end of the day, this is forced generosity. It's mandatory. And
Well,
what you're
they have
trying
the choice to leave, though. They have the choice to just leave the country if they don't like it. It's
is
not
that
forced.
is that a smart thing to do? To because a lot of see, this is actually what's happening in a lot of these more liberally run, socially run areas. They're raising taxes, and the wealthy people are living, and they're leaving,
Mhm.
and the tax base is drying up, and they're making even less tax money than they originally had. They're moving to other states that treat them better. So I mean, it's just I just don't think it's practical to just say just take the money from the rich. There's not that many of them. Who cares what they think? I don't think it's ethical. I don't think it's practical. And to me,
Well, I
this
feel
is
like it's such a privilege, though. Like you're talking about such a huge privilege. Like it's not like some God-given right to own $100 billion. Like that's an
it is.
insane.
It is. It is. It's a God-given privilege to own whatever it is you've rightfully earned. And what's not a God-given privilege is to take that from somebody just because. I understand, Andy. I think you're a good person. I'm not saying you're a bad person. I'm not saying I don't see exactly where you're coming from, but this you are essentially just throwing out personal private property rights because you have arbitrarily determined that they have too much money than what you think is right.
No, I don't want to throw out property rights. I want to limit them. If there are people that are in poverty, then the property rights should be at a limit.
Don't you think a lot of times poverty is a result of not necessarily there being people who are extremely wealthy, but because of choices that people in poverty are making? Do you think there's any merit to a claim like that?
No, I mean, yeah, there are definitely situations like that, but I don't think that they represent the majority of people that are in poverty. I think that most of poverty comes from people being born into a bad system. You know what I mean? And that they're a product of that environment. They don't have access to college and stuff. Like they don't have families that can help them pay for college, and that maybe they don't even have a family that helps them care about their education as they're growing up, for that matter. And that's a result of living in a poverty-stricken environment. You see that all across poverty-stricken environments: poor education, poor family values, and things like that. And
Right.
that comes from not having the advantages that some of these billionaires have at their fingertips and are just given to them from their families, or they're able to take out multiple $1 million loans to invest in the stock market or something, whereas these people in the poverty level don't have those advantages, and so they're stuck in that system. It's extremely hard to get out of, and I say that coming from a poverty stricken household.
Yeah, I think that personally, I think that there are probably a couple examples of people who, I guess there's not a couple, is not the way to put it. I think that a lot of people who have wealth have basically worked for it, or they work to put themselves in a position where they are earning a lot. I don't think there's a lot of people who just jump into a job where they're making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. I think it's probably a lifetime of building yourself, and then at the end of the road, there'll be other people say, "You're not doing anything. You just let your underlings do all the work." That kind of dismisses all the years of their life they sacrifice to get into that position where they would be making the money, because that's what people strive for. That's the reward of building yourself up. Now, I'm not. There's nepotism. There are situations where the corporation or whatever the business is rigged for certain people to succeed more than others. But I really feel like when you just have this general idea of it's not fair for them to have those advantages. I think that dismisses the potential that they actually worked really hard to get into those situations where they do have those possibilities for themselves. You know what I'm saying? Isn't it kind of unfair for them to work so long for so hard and probably make a lot of sacrifices, and at the end of the day, just have someone else be like, you have too much. We're going to take it from you and give it to somebody else because they're poor. Which, by the way, maybe they're poor because they made those choices. That's another thing I don't see is like. Here's the thing. This is going to be controversial. I think the poor are in many cases responsible for their own poverty. I don't have a whole lot of sympathy for the welfare class. I think that these people have put themselves in this kind of situation in many cases, and this is just this, like, you see all the welfare fraud they're finding these days, the billions and billions of dollars that are being exposed and have always been exposed in the welfare system. Like, and you got to realize that the system you want is really largely already in place, and it's just not working. Like, the United States redistributes like $1 trillion every single year to all these different welfare programs. Like, you have Medicaid. Well, Social Security isn't really a welfare program technically, but it is. It's a welfare program for old people. You have food stamps. You have all this free housing. You have a lot of free healthcare, and these people are still poor, and they're worse off than ever. So I really don't think tax the rich and give it to the poor is. It's been proven to not be effective at this point, in my opinion. Largely, I don't know, like, if you have something you've seen that you feel differently.
Well, it hasn't happened. It's not happening, at least not fairly.
What's when you say it's not happening? What exactly are you talking about?
The people that are making an insanely high amount of money, like way more than they could possibly need, those people are not being taxed a fair rate. They should be being taxed like 75% of their money.
Why? So they are being taxed at 37%. So
Right.
let
The same as someone making $600,000. That's ridiculous. That there's not enough of.
Well, $600,000 is a massive amount of money. Like, if I had $600,000, I would probably retire right now at my age. Like, I wouldn't even work another day because I know how to use money wisely and invest it and kind of get a good return on it. If someone gave me $600,000 just once right now, I could invest it, make 10% annually, and have a $60,000 passive income immediately. So, $600,000 is a lot of money. It's enough to live off for your entire life if you're smart.
It's maybe, I don't know. I make more than 100,000, and it's not that comfortable.
Well, again, it kind of depends on Michigan. I don't know where you live exactly, but anyway. So I'm gonna do some math here. So if someone makes $1 billion in America, which I don't think there's more than, like, maybe literally a handful of people who make that much annually. I think it's literally like Elon Musk and like Jeff Bezos, and like that might be it. Maybe Mark Zuckerberg. But hold on, let me do a search just how many people on Earth make $1 billion annually? I'm just curious. I'm just gonna do this right now. I'm not sure what it's gonna say. So AI Assist is there are 0 individuals on Earth who make $1 billion annually. So literally not.
What?
Yeah, that's what it says. So there are people who are worth $1 billion. Okay. So there are people who are worth billions, but there is nobody who makes $1 billion a year. That's just not something that exists as a reality currently. Well, let me see if I can confirm this.
I know it's just ChatGPT, but I ChatGPT'd it just now to see what it would say, and it's like listing off 5 people that are earning like 4 to 5 billion per year.
Okay, so we're using different AI systems. I'm not using ChatGPT. Who is ChatGPT listing as earning $1 billion annually? Does it say their names?
Yeah, it says Christopher Hahn, for example, earned $4.9 billion in 2025.
Okay.
Stephen Cohen earned $4 billion. I just asked it to list the 5 highest earning people in 2025, and it says those people are earning like a few billion per year.
Let me, man.
I don't know where it gets. Sometimes ChatGPT just straight up spits out bullshit, so I don't really know.
And you know what's interesting? When I type in highest earning people on Earth, it's giving me the people with the highest net worth, but not how much. So here's the thing. Apparently, Elon Musk is worth $684 billion.
That's insane. He was worth 200 billion like 2 years ago.
So logically, you have to be making more than $1 billion a year to be that rich. It's just not possible to have that much money and not make more than $1 billion a year.
That's
Uh,
$400 billion. It must have been either 2 or 3 years ago. He was only worth 200 million. So that's when he was like competing with Jeff Bezos for the richest man in the world. He was at 220 billion, and now he's at 600 billion. So he's increased 400 billion net worth in the course of 3 years. Say that's almost 100 billion per year. That's like 75 billion per year he's making.
but anyways, okay, so let's just say that these individuals do exist. So at 37%, that person is paying $370 million in individual taxes. Okay. So $370 million in individual taxes is a incredibly
That's
so
like
these
that's like them dropping a penny out of their back pocket.
no, $370 million is not a penny to anybody. That's a
To
lot.
Elon Musk, 300, even if it was $1 billion in taxes, that is 1/600th of his total money. Like if I pay taxes, it's 1/3 of my total earnings. He's paying 1/600th.
Okay, well, the point is, it's not a small amount of money compared to how much money. Yeah, people shouldn't have to pay all of their money into the taxes. I just don't. I personally, I don't think anyone should be paying more than 10% of what they earn personally. But 37% is a huge percentage of whatever a person's making, and for these people, they're paying more. They think about it. That's more than like most of the people of the bottom of the list combined make in a year. It's just the amount they're paying in taxes. So the wealthy are paying a lot in taxes. There's just no question about it.
They're paying a lot compared to the average working person or something, but as far as like how hard of a hit it is to their money, it's
Well,
nothing.
you seem to have the idea the tax code is about punishing people for having to. No, that's the tax money should be about funding
Well,
what
no,
goes
it's a
on.
burden. It's a burden that falls on the American taxpayer, and that burden should be equal, and it's unequal right now. He's paying the like Elon Musk is paying a percentage in taxes that doesn't even affect him. He could lose 10 times that much money, and he would still be absolutely set for the rest of his life, 10 times over. It doesn't affect it. These are literally just numbers to him. Like to the average working person, paying a third of your money in taxes is crippling to your life. It's completely different. It's not the same.
No, okay, so I guess what I would say is, would you be in favor of taxing these people at like say 30 and your average person maybe around like 5%, and that way, because if you're making $50,000 a year and you pay 5%, what is that,
Yeah.
2,500? So that you think that would be a fair system?
Yeah. I
Oh,
like that
okay, okay.
idea.
I'm totally in agreement with you
Just,
there.
just that it's more, you know what I mean? Like they should be making a huge contribution to society if they're allowed the privilege to earn that much money.
Well, here's my thing. I think this is why I believe in a 10% flat tax rate for all people. Because okay, let's say you make $100, you make $1,000, you're paying $100. But if you make $1 billion, you're paying $100 million. So it's equally, punishing for, whatever it is you're making. Would that system work for you, or do you not like that either? Or do you think let's say like anyone who's make like let's say the bottom 10% of earners, they only have to pay 1%. And then the between like 10 and 90% it's like maybe 5%. And then the highest class pays like 20%. Would that work for you?
Yeah, I think so. Well, the point is just to get more money back into the lower classes' hands so that they have advantages. So that they have money to invest, put their kids into college since college is, ridiculously expensive, or money to invest in a safe household in a safe neighborhood, or things like that, like money to invest in a babysitter so that you can get a better job.
Well, another thing to take into consideration is really, Andy, you have to understand that when you give people money, they don't always use it for the right thing. So, for instance, there's been a lot of studies done on people who win the lottery and the mega lotto. and even celebrity athletes go broke. Look at Floyd Mayweather. He was worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and now he's bankrupt. And a lot of these people who win the lottery, they end up going broke even after they'll win tens of millions of dollars in the lottery, and then they'll be broke several years later. So there are many cases of this. So you have to understand that your idea of giving people money, you have to understand that it's a lot of the problem is that a lot of people on our side just aren't good with money. And
there's another statistic too that I hate to say because I come from the streets myself, but it's a fact that if you want to help homeless people, the best thing to do is to try to get them some food and shelter. And the worst thing you can do for them, the worst thing you can do is not do anything, but giving them just cash. Significant number of people that end up on the streets have drug and alcohol problems. They either had those problems which got them on the streets, or they incur those problems living on the streets. And when you give somebody cash, then you're probably buying them, drugs and alcohol plus whatever they might need, because they're, you're better off helping them to get food and shelter, helping them to get resources, helping them to get counseling, helping them to get off the streets, as opposed to just, giving people cash is never been proven on a whole to be a good idea, because people who don't have cash usually don't have cash for a reason. That's not to say that poor people or like low income people aren't willing to work. They just can't get good jobs. There's definitely that's why I think giving the poor people, the rich people's money, I don't think is a viable solution. I think the free hospitals, the free colleges, the free counseling, the free healthcare, like I said, those kind of programs, free community centers, right? So that the kids that need an after school program, there's lots of safe places for them to go. This is how you infuse the lower class, by giving them resources that will inspire and encourage and reward productivity and good choice making. Just giving people money, that's not the solution, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would say I agree, because the only reason I think that they need the money is for those specific benefits that you're listing off, like college and access to healthcare and stuff. So if those benefits are available, the money isn't the issue. But right now, like the lack of that money is why they don't have access to those things.
I agree. And the other benefit is like we said earlier, is that when everybody has free healthcare, everybody benefits from living in a healthier environment. And when everybody has free college, everybody benefits from being around more educated people. More educated people are less likely to commit crimes and to be more productive and not need these handouts. So you're helping yourself when you infuse these types of programs for people, so it's a win-win situation, in my opinion.
Seth Scales has joined us. Seth Scales, good to see you. Maybe you want to weigh in on something you've heard, or whatever the case may be. Feel free to, if you want to introduce yourself. Obviously, you've been here before, but introduce yourself if you want to, and basically say what it is you had to say. Go ahead.
Yeah, what's up? I haven't really been listening. I only heard the past minute, and it sounds about healthcare. I just wanted to come up and talk about whatever you guys were talking about, because it seems like a general discussion.
Yeah, so basically, hold on, give me a second here, Seth Scales. So basically, where did I put that? Hold on one second. There it is. This is kind of the original series of prompts that, at the beginning of the stream that I kind of put out there for everyone to discuss. And I'll just run through them before you comment. Just, basically we're having a stream about, this is, believe it or not, even though I'm passionate about politics and things like this, I've never done a stream on it. This is the first time I've had this particular type of open discussion. But I decided to give it a try just to see how it would go. So far, I'm pretty pleased, because I think there's been some good conversation. And anyways, is Donald Trump a good president? Capitalism versus socialism, conservatism versus liberalism. Is America the greatest country ever? Is it a good country even? Global issues, environmental issues. So that's kind of what got everything started. And a lot of it has focused on dealing with wealth inequality in the country, and what is the most ethical and most effective way of basically looking at how much money people have, saying, is it too much, or do certain people have too much money? If they do, what do we do about it? And how do we allocate our resources in the most effective way? Stuff like that. Trying to think of the best system. So Yeah, so that is kind of mostly what we've been talking about. Part of that would deal with healthcare, like obviously, if you want to do the right thing with people with the money that's being taken from the wealthy, one of the things that's been suggested as is often done is that there should be free healthcare, which I strongly oppose. Free healthcare. I mean, government run, taxpayer funded healthcare, I think would be a disaster, especially in our current environment. But again, I understand where people are coming from and why they think it's a good idea. I'm not one to sit here and say I'm questioning motives. I actually think that there are a lot of I understand why people think this is a good idea, and it's very tempting. But regardless, feel free to provide your perspective on any of the things that I've just mentioned. Go ahead.
Well, I would just say that wealth inequality is pretty much built into civilization and society itself, and it's designed for people to manage more or a larger group of people so that their labor can be directed towards goals which are determined by some sort of hierarchy that is completely not determined at all by the individuals who are actually working within the hierarchy. It's always been this way, and at this point, civilization is running on a feedback loop that it cannot break out of through systemic reform, because the systems are designed, as I said, to create this wealth inequality. So even through something like healthcare, you're dealing with this middleman who is basically determining how much the bill should be and how much they should get paid, while eliminating what should be a capitalist thing where the patient and the doctor determine the price uh, between themselves. But
That,
really,
that's
that's
whoa,
just
whoa, 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 whoa. That is the capitalist system. The capitalist system doesn't do anything to regulate the prices that are being established by the medical providers. So that is capitalism. It's just saying, I'm a doctor, I'm going to treat you, I'm going to charge you this much. What's wrong with that?
well, the doctors don't really know what to charge because they're being told what to charge by these
By
other
whom?
agencies, by the
No, they're not.
insurance
No,
agents,
actually, they're
how
not.
much they
If you
charge.
set up, I hate to. Okay, I interrupted you. I apologize. I need to do a better job of not doing that. But
I mean, well, I just say, it's really what if we want to make any real changes, what needs to happen is people need to set up adjacent communities similar to what we have with people like the Amish and the farmer veterans community, and try to mimic what they do as neighbors, while at the same time attempting to slow down the legal process by calling out their blatant hypocrisy and their inability to uphold their own standards on themselves, such as the failure to uphold the social contract and live up to the standards of the Constitution.
when you joined Socios, you said the system is designed for there to be wealth inequality. Can you explain how that works? How is the America? Let's just keep it real. America, how is it in your mind designed to breed wealth inequality? Is that really something that you believe our system is designed to do?
It's not just America, it's every civilization.
I
If you look
understand
at
that, but
America
how does
and
it
how
work? How
they
does it work
do
with
it,
America?
they do it through today fractional reserve banking, which is explained in documents like Modern Money Mechanics, which detail how the banking system came about and its true purpose, and how it's designed to punish people who want to actually save their money because they want people to spend their money. So that way they can control interest rates and loans through a fiat currency that they continuously inflate. So that way they can actually transfer the real wealth of this nation through their debt system or the fiat currency. Because when when they loan their money out to the public and they put interest on it, they know that not everyone's going to be able to pay back the money that is loaned, because they're literally asking for more money than is in circulation to be paid back to them. So this creates a system of essentially musical chairs where collateral is declared and they seize real wealth in exchange for paper wealth that is basically arbitrary.
Well, I must admit that was not the answer I was expecting. See, usually when I ask people why is there wealth inequality, I get this response: "Oh, it's rigged so that the corporations get all the money and the little man get." That's so I was expecting something like that, but you gave a totally unpredictable answer and unpredicted answer, I should say, which is interesting. I'm not saying you're wrong. I wasn't expecting it because if you had given the typical society is rigged for the elites and the wealthy business, billionaire class, and I would have challenged you there, but I actually kind of agree with you that that in some ways the fiat currency Federal Reserve System is very deeply flawed. But let me ask you this, Set Scales, and I don't want to objective ethics and Andy, I don't want to, if you have anything to say, feel free to kind of interject as well. But I do want to make a comment. If society were to be not, and I'm just speaking hypothetically, theoretically, let's say the United States were to go back to non-fractional reserve banking, non-fiat, that we have a strong sort of reserve or whatever you call it, gold backing or whatever it is, whatever you want to call it. And all the laws in our society would be applied equally to all people, regardless of ethnicity, background, family history, all that. Do you think there would be no inequality in that situation, or would inequality still arise?
Of course, inequality would still arise. There's an arbitrary group of masters who are determining what's right and wrong and calling it law.
No, I'm not. No, that's not the premise. The premise is that there's not.
You see, I'm an anarchist. I reject the statist model. I reject all of civilization. I think that it's basically a cancer on the earth designed to separate the human spirit from the unlimited spiritual medium that we all exist in. And it gets you focused on man's achievements and man's categorizations of the world so that we can control the chaos that we exist in. But by attempting to control the chaos, man in the end will just lose control of himself if we continue this path, because we will inevitably create transhumanism, which their stated goals is to basically replace humans.
That's very interesting, because I'm pretty sure Andy and I had a conversation about transhumanism a few weeks ago, and he kind of used it as a positive thing. Or maybe it wasn't Andy, maybe it was someone else. But
it was on my channel.
Okay, that's right. That was an interesting conversation. Anyways,
it was.
Let me.
I'd like to, before we get too far off the rails into the voodoo stuff, and I know that's kind of Set Scale shtick, and you're a religious channel, but I'd see problems with that, but I don't know, that's just going to derail. But I would like to touch on one of the bullet points at some point here in the conversation about, is America the greatest country in the world, or is it a good country? So I don't want to interrupt what your guys are.
Okay, let's Set Scales. I do want to kind of just hold Set Scales to the premise just for a minute or two and see how he responds, because he actually, remember, Set Scales, I asked you, the premise I set up is that there's no secret cabal of people manipulating laws to benefit. The premise is that we actually, as a society as a whole, manage to create laws that apply equally to everyone. No one's able to manipulate them. Everyone's just go out there and do your best and make as much money as you can or can't, and let the chips fall where they may.
Doesn't matter, because
let me ask the question: would inequality still arise in that scenario? Yes or no? That's all I want to say. Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. Why would
the systems themselves are a machine that remove the value of the individual and equate it to output. What are you outputting for society? How well are you following society's expectations? The sovereignty of the individual is reduced to numbers on a paper that equate to what they're producing for the state and how they're supposedly making everyone else's lives better through their output. This is the problem. People are not tools to be used by a machine. People are individuals whose purpose in life is to find their own purpose. But these systems, it doesn't matter who's in control, because as I stated, every civilization that you're probably going to name is built on a system that's designed to extract labor from the sovereign human individual and reduce them to outputs in glory of the state.
I have to respond quickly. First of all, the reason inequality would arise, in my opinion, is because different people exert different levels of effort, and there's just always going to be some people who do better than others. There's just no way to avoid it, even in a free system. And you're never going to eliminate labor. There's always going to have to be somebody working somewhere doing something. Otherwise, nothing will get done. So we'll never have us. It's a horrible idea to try to eliminate labor and create a society where no one's working, because it's just not, literally, it's not possible. If everyone's just sitting around doing nothing, obviously things are going to collapse. I don't want a response. I want to, well, actually,
I just want to say, I never said that. I never said we don't need labor.
Okay. But you did say labor is designed to, extract people's souls or whatever. I know
I actually said that labor is designed to be divided in a way so that some people don't have to do anything while everyone else is having to do what they want.
Okay, there's truth to that. I can't deny that. All right, I think this is a good segue into, is America the greatest country ever, or is it even a good country at all? And Objective Ethics has thoughts, so let's hear what they are.
Yeah, I brought up, and I don't want to take too long with this, but I did bring up a number of statistics to just back up what I'm saying here really quickly. But I recently did a discussion, I think it might have been last week, about prison having a revolving door, and I focused on the prison problem and the justice system in America specifically. And as a comparison, I decided to choose Norway. So when you say, is America the greatest country ever, I think it's demonstrably can be proven it's not. It's a failed experiment in many ways. However, does that mean it's a bad country? No, I don't think it is a bad country, because there's actually a lot worse countries out there. I think that America is probably ranks about in the middle, and it really does in most statistics that I'm looking at. GDP is one of the few places where America excels, but I think there's some reasons we could look at that. But on the counter of that, if you look at Norway, let's just start here real quick. So Norway ranks second globally in renewable energy consumption, with approximately 70% of its total energy coming from renewable sources. I'm big on global issues and global responsibility, environmental responsibility. So Norway ranking second globally is a big statistic for me personally because of my feelings on that. Second is a pretty impressive ranking when you're talking about countries all over the world. GDP, Norway is actually in 8th currently, and America is in 7th. So the one shining light that America has, being ranked 7th in the world, Norway is only one behind them, ranked at 8th. Let me see here. I'm trying to go as quick as I can here. Not that one, this one here. Okay, so this is one of the biggest indicators that talk about what a good job Norway is doing compared to America. The crime rate. Norway, how did I lose that? Norway, let me see. Let's see if that's the one I was looking at here. That's not. Just real quick, sorry guys, bear with me here. It'll be worth the wait here. Come on. Okay, let me pull this down here. Crime index. Okay, so I can't find the specific statistic to do as a comparison, but Norway is in the bottom half. It's considered low tier on crime, which is actually the lower the better. Oh, here it is right here. So Norway ranks in the low end at a 33.3% rating. America rates at the very high end at a 49.2%, almost 50% crime per capita. We look at violent crime. Norway is currently ranked 7th in the world for lowest violent crimes. Oh, no. I'm sorry. Yeah, they're ranked 8th from the bottom in violent crimes, whereas America is ranked 8th from the top, meaning most in violent crimes. We look at, when it comes to actual crimes, what are they doing with their prisoners? Right now, Norway is the second best country in recidivism rate, which is reoffenders. Norway ranks 2nd globally with having the lowest number of people who actually reoffend after they go through their programs. The reason why Norway does so good is because Norway focuses on, let me get to my recidivism. I have too many of these opened up. Here it is right here. Okay, so Norway focuses on small community-based prisons, education and vocational training, normalization programs, and family visits. And then the final statistic here is going to be happiness index. Norway currently ranks 7 globally. And when it comes to this statistic, Norway regularly finished historically. Norway has ranked in the top tier of the index, often in the 1st place to 7th place position for the happiness index. The happiness index looks at things like measures average self-reported life satisfaction, factoring factors such as GDP per capita, social support, healthy life expectancy, freedom, generosity, and perceptions of corruption. And we look at some of the things that Norway's doing that I was talking about before. Norway does not have completely free healthcare, but is heavily subsidized with co-payments capped annually, ensuring affordable access for residents. And all education in Norway is free, including colleges to all students, including international students. There are no tuition fees. And I could go on and on and on. I don't want to, just keep going, but I've got a number of these statistics. In every single measurable category, with the exception of GDP, Norway blows America out of the water. And we see the results with the happiness index, the low crime rate, and the 2nd lowest recidivism rate in the entire world. People just don't reoffend. Whereas America's recidivism rate is up almost 80% within 5 years. So no, I don't think America is even close to the greatest country in the world. The other thing I want to touch on here, and maybe I'll just make this my closing statement if I can, Ace, all at one time. Do you mind?
Go ahead.
Okay, you made a comment that we should be doing what Christ taught, and you made the other comment that God. So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm paraphrasing here. That basically something about God wants people to be able to keep what they earn. So capitalism is the best. But the problem, there's 2 problems with that. First of all, Christ actually said, "Blessed are the poor," right? For they shall inherit the kingdom of heaven. Christ also, there's this story, and I'm going to paraphrase. I don't have it looked up in front of me, but the rich man came to Jesus and said, "What must I do to get into heaven?" And Jesus responded, "Say, give everything you have to the poor." And the rich man went away distraught at this news. And Jesus looked at his disciples and said something to the degree that it is easier for a camel to get through the eye of the needle than it is for a rich man to get into heaven. So if God wants everybody to keep whatever they can earn, Jesus doesn't seem to be on God's page with that, I would say. And the other issue, the final issue I would say, is that when we say we should use Christianity or any other religion to determine what our laws and our structure should be, the reason I've never lost a debate on biblical morality, and I probably never will, is because the point that I hammer down on, before I even get into the actual actions and the moral prescriptions that are in the Bible, my main talking point in this debate is always this religion has thousands of different denominations. There's 3 different Abrahamic sects. None of these people agree. There's not just one type of Judaism or one type of Islam either. They have multiple sects within their cult. So nobody can agree on what this religion and what this book is even saying we should do. So to make the claim that we should use that as the structure to build anything productive from, to me, is incoherent. I do not understand how people can make that claim. If there was one religion and one sect and it was everybody looked at it and said, this is what the rules are, and everybody agreed, it was obvious, you might have an argument there. But given the fact that there is so much disagreement, so much reinterpretation, it happens all the time on your channel, the Trinitarians versus the Unitarians, what does Jesus teach versus what does Paul teach? I could go on and on and on. There's no way that you could convince me that that would be a good thing to use as the basis for building a society, for coming up with your morals, which is what we build our laws and our politics around ultimately. I mean, I just think that's an incoherent statement. Forget the fact that I don't believe that there even is a God. Set that aside. Even if I said, okay, I believe in God, grant you the God, right? We cannot use something that's been so susceptible to misinterpretation to build a system on. And I think that's where I'll end that.
All right. Well, here's the thing. Okay, so basically, there are two parts to your comment, and I'm just gonna. I do have things I want to say in response to that, and again, and I do want to say I appreciate you bringing forward these ideas and giving us things to analyze and consider. As far as Norway is concerned, I've also heard a lot of people talking about what a good country Norway is. And I just want to say I would never want to live in Norway compared to the United States. I simply do not believe that this happiness index thing that people talk about. I don't see millions of people I guess a couple years ago, a lot of people from Arab countries flooded into Norway. But I guarantee if you ask the world population where they'd rather go, Norway or the United States, they're all saying United States. Norway is not that great of a country to live in. It has a much smaller population than the United States, so it's much easier to run the affairs of society compared to 300 million people. Norway has a population of about 5 million people. It's largely ethnically homogenous, which does make a difference. We're not nearly as diverse. Unfortunately, a lot of people like to praise diversity. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with diversity, but it can create tensions that wouldn't otherwise exist in a society. And as a result, there's more issues that you have to deal with there. Again, that's not to say there's any bad group or non-bad group. It's just to say that when you have a small ethnically homogenous country, it is much easier to run and get things to work smoothly than it is a large, diversified country like the United States. It's a lot easier to govern things like that. You can have your socialist system. There's a lot more trust in society and things like that. There's no free education in Norway. They have an extremely high tax rate. A lot of the money people, this is exactly Andy and others were talking about. If you want to have free healthcare, free education, you've got to come from somewhere. Well, it comes from the people who work. I'm sure there's a lot of people who aren't happy with it. There's probably a lot of people who probably dodge their taxes, just like all the other high tax places on earth. Nothing's free. The education system isn't free. There's always going to be a pay. They probably have public debt. The United States has $21 trillion in debt, or excuse me, 30. I don't even know what's that. It's probably $40 trillion in debt because of all the quote free stuff we give out. We can't even pay for it. We can't even raise enough taxes, even though we have one of the highest, progressive tax rates in the entire world. But again, this is about Norway. So I really don't buy the argument that Norway is this amazing country that's so much better than the United States. Personally, I would, like I've already said, I would never want to live in Norway compared to the United States. Would I want to visit it? Absolutely. It sounds like a really charming place. Would never want to live there. I do not want to live in a high tax society like Norway. And this isn't their fault, but it's freaking cold in Norway. So I just don't buy the fact that people are happy living in this cold place up north. I just don't. And go ahead.
Oh, I didn't want to interrupt. I was going to respond to something, but I didn't want to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, I can go to the other I'll leave it there for now. But I also do want to respond to the aspects about Christianity. But if you have something you've said about what I just said, go ahead.
Yeah, let's just really quick on the Norway thing. So I think that the low crime rate, low recidivity rate, is a huge statistic that actually kind of refutes quite a bit of what you're saying. I think the fact that Norway is extremely cold climate compared to the most populated cities in the U.S., which are coastal cities, especially Florida and California and Texas. So you're comparing apples to oranges. You also have, I think that the idea of being non-diverse is somehow going to reduce crime. I don't think that holds up statistically when we look historically, how many white people have killed white people, black people kill black people, Asian people kill Asian people, so on and so forth. So that whole oh, if you stay with your own race, you're going to have lower crime. I don't see that historically holding up at all. And I think that the free education system, I think holds up. I do agree with you. There is a tax rate, but I think it actually feeds into what Andy and I were saying, that the highest tax rate is for the richest people. The lowest tax rate by far is for the poorest people. And the tax rates are actually very similar to US, with the exception of the highest income earners do pay a higher income tax. But otherwise, as far as the average earner and the low earners, they pay a lower tax rate. So the higher income tax and the lower the average income, right, which is similar to where we would be at, right? The average median household income of a couple $100,000 or less, they're actually paying a flat tax, which is relative to what we're paying here in the US. So it's for people, the average people are not actually paying a higher tax bracket, but the richer people are paying a higher tax rate. You're right on that.
Okay. Well, maybe I'll do a little more research. I'm not saying Norway's a bad country. I mean, certainly there are worse countries. Or like, as far as like, if I were to rank countries that I would want to live in, Norway would probably be, closer above the middle. I would probably put them one of the higher countries. But again, that's just does that objectively make them better than the United States? No, it doesn't. So
well, I think that we're talking about the system, though, and I think that a lot of your reservation would be relative to the weather, right? The climate and stuff like that.
Yeah, they can't. You're right. They can't control for that. So that's not really a fair criticism. I agree. But again, the system they have in place, they are, they're not a classically socialist country, but they are what you would call a liberal, a more liberally socialist state as far as their welfare system. Personally, I have no interest. I'm someone who personally, I think it's the fairest thing is if you earn some money, you should keep it. If you earn a lot of money, you should be able to keep it. And obviously, you should be generous. If you earn more than you should be generous. And that goes to the second point you were making, which was about the teachings of Christ. It's not so much that God, and I will let you respond to it. I probably want to respond. Just give me a second.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I think we both made our points on Norway. Once we hammer down, it is the system I'm pointing out, not to say that it's the most, it's probably a beautiful country and it probably would be a nice place to live. But I think a lot of reservation. I don't agree with the immigration issue at all. I think that that's one of America's strengths, actually. One of the reasons the GDP is as high as it is here. And one of the reasons we flourish is because we have different people from all over the world coming here and bringing great ideas. So I just have a fundamental disagreement with you there. But I think that we both bore out our arguments there. I would encourage people to look at the numbers, though, because for me, the numbers bear out the truth. And the truth is objectively that low crime rates, free health, very low cost healthcare, free education for everybody, low recidivity rates is a huge one. And, you can say the happiness index, whatever, but the self-reporting is only a small part of that happiness index. It has to do with life expectancy, overall public health, right? Trust in the government, low corruption. You don't think that's an important statistic? And when it comes to the happiness index, I mean, I think we have a fundamental disagreement there. I think the numbers bear out quite well in the system that they're using, because we have to look at a broad spectrum of categories.
Yeah, I see your point there, that a lot of it isn't necessarily how people respond, but rather they're measuring these various metrics in society. I can see Norway, doing very well. And again, I'm not even saying Norway is necessarily a bad country. Part of me does wonder if they could be doing better if they didn't have some of the basically the socialist elements of their government. I wonder if maybe things could be even better. But again, like you said, they do very well in some areas. There's no denying that. So I'm not gonna dispute that. But going back to I do want to respond a little bit to the point about how wealth and how it interacts with the teachings of Christ. I think that was an important point, which is that I did say something earlier about, God. It's not so much that God wants people to be wealthy. Obviously, even Jesus taught that the wealthy are in a position of being condemned for their wealth. So there is a question there. The thing is this, that I think God, when people do own something, I think it's ethical, again, coming from the perspective of God has established it as being ethical or virtuous, that that person's property, or what that person owes that person's wealth, is not subject to being deprived from him or her based on what other people think is right or wrong, or too much or too little. So ethically, that person is entitled to keep whatever it is that he or she has, whether it's $10 or $10 billion. That being said, the whole point of Christianity is that you really shouldn't own that much, because it is, you are basically keeping all this money for yourself, and you look around and all these people need help, and you're hoarding wealth for yourself. So this is why Christianity is so important, because it motivates people to say to themselves, I should be giving generously because I want to, not because some politicians in Washington or wherever the capital is of whatever society are taxing me and being corrupt and maybe not even giving it to the people that. No, it should come from within. People who make enough money to feed themselves should I think Christianity compels people to look at how much money they have and say, if I have more than I need, I'm going to help others. Whereas, in a secular system that doesn't have any moral requirements, just basically suggestions, I think that's much more likely to people just being like, this is what I want. I'm under no obligation to give money to others. I'm going to keep the money I have. And that leads to other people saying, well, we don't believe that, voting to take your money is ethically wrong. It creates this class warfare system. So I think Christianity does solve the problem of wealth inequality. If the wealthy were to all convert to Christianity and follow the teaching of Christ, I don't think they would have as much money as they do, because they'd be giving it away to exactly the things you all are talking about. That's my opinion. But you can respond to that.
Yeah, Jesus says, whose face is on that coin? They said Caesar's, and he says, give unto Caesar's what is Caesar's. And because that is the point that Jesus said, is give it away. You don't need this. And you're better off if you do free yourself from this. This is actually a burden. And I think that if we're just going to say, well, all people should just do it, I agree. But we don't need religion to tell us that. We need to understand objective morality and what that's based on equality, and what living your best life actually means, which means supporting your neighbor, making sure your neighbor's living his best life. If I don't have to worry about my neighbor stealing from me, I'm living my best life. How can I ensure my neighbor doesn't want to steal from me? I can make sure my neighbor has what they need to the best of my ability, so on and so forth. If the people on the other side of the ocean, if I'm not taking from them and extracting resources from them and trying to prohibit them from their own freedom and well-being and their happiness, I don't have to worry about them shooting missiles over the river, over the ocean at me. So if we understood this principle of equality, of freedom and well-being, and of a moral agency, we wouldn't need religion, we wouldn't need politics, we wouldn't need governments, we wouldn't need anarchy to solve the problem. We would literally just be helping each other out, because that would be the way we could make our own lives better. So I agree with you there, but I don't think we need religion to get there. So I just think that what the solution would be, hey, everybody do the right thing. Well, that's great. But since that's not going to happen, clearly, what system can we put in place that will encourage people, to motivate people, and unfortunately coerce people to do what is going to be mutually beneficial for everybody to the best of our ability?
Yeah, I'm sorry. You can't use a system to make everyone behave a way. All you're going to do is inadvertently make more criminals, and simultaneously make people who are seen as legitimate authority figures, when in reality they're actually bad people, because they're attempting to force people to behave what they deem to be some sort of good way, which, as you were pointing out, when it comes to Christianity, people can't even agree on that. And so really, I mean, just about every single human culture there is can't agree on what's good generally. And this is because of the things that you just said, governments and religions. So the solution is clearly not to impose a system that resembles these things to make people good.
Respond. Objective ethics.
Well, I think that the systems that have been used are regurgitations of the same broken systems. It's been this way for thousands of years, and a lot of it is predicated using religion to motivate these governments, to motivate these political ideas. When a lot of it has to do with colonialism and empiricism, and that system has not changed over thousands of years. So I think we need a better system based on the reality of the human nature that we just have to accept as true. I mean, educating people on objective morality and educating people on equality is, in my opinion, the best system to have in place, but it does require a systematic approach. I mean, I don't think we can get away from that. Anarchy never works because we've seen multiple anarchist movements. Every time an anarchy rises up and takes over power, the very first thing they do is develop their own system. We see it every single time. This is what happens. So when people say, well, we should just tear it all down, people, the nature of us as being a social species, have to cooperate and learn to work together. So if we have a system that basically just focuses on like the healthcare system, we need to have a certain regulations in the healthcare system to make sure that bad medicines aren't being promoted through ignorance, not maliciously, but just that we make sure that we're getting the best medical treatment using the best technologies and so on and so forth. And I think that so certain regulations are important just because not everybody has the same education level at the very least. If there's no corruption, then there's nothing wrong with the system.
I just have to point out, so what is good? What is objective morality, or what is its foundation? Its foundation is basically you own yourself. You are the sovereign authority over how you interact in the world. You're responsible for your actions. Therefore, you must respect all other beings as such, as if they have the same authority as you do. How do you enforce that or coerce that through a system?
Because this having the same level of respect and self-respect and mutual respect doesn't give everybody the same quote unquote authority. A police officer has a level of authority. A judge has a level of authority. There are people who have cognitive disabilities where they don't understand that doing terrible things to women and children is wrong. They just don't get it. They don't have empathy. They have mental disorder. You have to have somebody with handcuffs and a nightstick or a gun, unfortunately, to capture those people. You can't have axe murder.
You're making a huge leap between people own themselves and some people don't realize that. So therefore, we need cops and judges.
I don't think it's such a big leak. I think that's the reality of the situation. So the moral social contract is derived by reason. It's set up by nature, which makes it objective, but it's ultimately derived through reason, which is where we understand why it's wrong to steal from people. I understand it's wrong to steal from people.
Is reason innate in every individual?
No, that's the problem. That's the problem.
How many people are incapable of realizing what you just said?
Even if it's just one person, that still institutes some kind of authority. Someone has to be an authority to get that one person, and it's certainly more than one person.
Why can't it be everyone? Why can't it be
everybody's the authority? Then everybody's going to snatch that one person up.
Every single person who understands objective morality and that they are their own sovereign authority is the authority. That's the foundation of morality. You can't appoint some arbitrary judge or police to be over that.
It's not arbitrary. It doesn't need to be arbitrary. Arbitrary means you have no reason. That's the definition of arbitrary. It is
arbitrary if you're saying that they have the power to coerce everyone to conform to some system.
By definition,
my point is saying is that those people are redundant.
By definition, it's not arbitrary if you have a reason. Arbitrary means no reason, right? Random or no reason. So it's not arbitrary. You've actually got a reason. The reason is, and I agree with you, the people who understand objective morality should be the people who are in charge because they will set up a system that focuses on equality, right? For everybody. But because there are people who won't play by the rules because of physiological disorders that they have, where they do not have the ability to understand what rules are or what morality is, or it doesn't matter that it's objective or not. There are people who believe that the earth was flat. Objectively speaking, the earth has never been flat. So just because there's an objective moral code doesn't mean people will recognize it.
There's no reason that because some people might be bad or are bad, that we should create a system that coerces people or might coerce people or has the potential to coerce people to protect everyone from the bad people. There's no foundation for that in the sovereign authority of each individual.
Of course there is, because you have justice as part of morality. Objective morality requires justice and
So
fairness.
where do these systems come into that? They only come into that because we want them to, because we want to appoint someone above us to have responsibility over us and circumvent the true basis for objective morality,
I
which is
want
that
a
we're
system,
responsible for
I want a
ourselves.
system that encourages people to build the safest roads possible. I build boats. I run other businesses in the in service industry. I don't build roads. I want to, when I drive across a bridge, I want to make sure that fucker doesn't fall into the water. And so, oh, sorry, Ace, that bridge doesn't fall into the water. And so, because of that, we need a system of that licenses and regulates bridge building. So there's lots of reasons why you can have systems without infringing on people's freedom and
As soon
well-being.
as you say licenses and stuff like that, you're insinuating that people need to buy into some system that they might not agree to. And that's as soon as they introduce that, you're saying, I have sovereign authority over this individual.
Wait,
Over
let me ask you. Wait,
land.
now I have a question. So you just, when you're driving over a bridge, you don't want people who are proven to have their expertise. You just want, anyone can build a bridge. I'm just going to drive over. Like, how does that make sense? Like, do you really think that's practical? You think you really think that'll work? Like, don't you think you'd be driving over the bridge and be like,
My point is, you don't need a coercive system to do it.
what? So what if like somebody is trying to build a bridge and they're not qualified? Like, do you think that's safe? Do you think it's a good idea? Don't you think that the people building the bridge need to be like certified and regulated and have the authority to do that?
What does any of that have to do with a coercive system like the government?
Well, if someone's trying to build a bridge, then you'd have to stop them. That if they aren't good enough at it, they're coerced not to do things that are dangerous to society. Well,
Or
medical
or
providers.
or
What if
no one could just use that bridge, or someone could just demolish it when they go along because they know it's not safe. You don't need a coercive system. You're like, okay, you can't build bridges. There's tons of other ways you can circumvent it that are perfectly moral and don't harm the person or interfere with the person interfering or trying to build the bridge.
But you haven't shown how regulating bridge building is in any way unethical or immoral.
Because all I'm pointing out is you don't need a coercive system to justify such a basic task.
Well, building a bridge is not a basic task.
It's
You have
something
to account for the curvature of the earth. You have to account for the curvature of the earth, and there's people walking around out there that think the earth is flat to this day. Not just any idiot could build a bridge. And you've got the weight. You've got to account for the swaying that goes back and forth with just wind. Forget about earthquake proofing. I mean, I'm not even a bridge builder, and I know that.
How's about the fact people were building bridges even when they thought the earth was flat?
They weren't building long bridges when they thought the earth was flat. I guarantee you that, because you have to account for the curvature of the earth to build a long bridge, first of all. Second of all, those bridges aren't up anymore. They don't last anymore. Those bridges, how do you know how many people died because of poor manufacturing in bridge building? Do you have a statistic to say that nobody was killed in a bridge that was built in the 3,000-4,000 years ago? Because we know that engineering requires highly educated people called engineers now.
I never once said people didn't die in building projects. They still do.
Yeah, and they're much safer now than they ever have been because our advancements in technology and our advancements in education and understanding physics.
Okay, but here's the thing that you're still not getting to the point. Where does a coercive system like government come in?
Because we're talking about the people that we're dealing with now practically. I said ideally you wouldn't need coercion, but that doesn't mean you don't need a system. But now, because we don't have people who understand objective morality, we don't have people that are not self-serving and that understand the equality and fairness, you can't just tear down all the systems and say, hey, look, we all ought to be just, have our freedom and well-being. There you go. Figure it out for yourself. Oh, by the way, I'm going to build a bridge over here. I don't have a clue what I'm doing, but I'm going to do it anyway because I've got my freedom and well-being and I don't want a system.
Okay, let me ask a question. Do you think that it's possible through education for humans to work themselves or build a world that is completely independent from these coercive systems?
Coercive, yes. Systems, no.
So so you have these systems, and the systems are based in that each individual is the sovereign authority over how they live in the world. What do these systems do?
Regulate bridge building, regulate medicine, medical practices.
So you just want one, you just like want one authority to oversee multiple things and determine how people should do these things like we have now.
Oh, I don't know how many authorities it would take to do this effectively. I don't know, but on the face value, you need systems because we're a cooperative species. We need different levels of our place in a system, and the authority, so to speak. Yeah, certain people do need certain authorities because, like I said, when you cannot just let axe murderers running around all over the place because no matter how much education you put into the world, there are people who have genetic disabilities and that will prevent them from understanding what the rules even are, or what they mean, or why they should follow them. And because that's a reality, you're never going to get away from that. That's we're an animal at the end of the day. You have to understand that there are going to be people with genetic deficiencies. You've got to have a way to deal with that because they're affecting, by letting an axe murderer run around, you are now affecting the freedom and well-being of everybody else.
Yeah, so I do think that there should be semblances of people who come together who should, oversee certain things. I'm not saying that we should get rid of, organized hierarchical structures for goal-oriented tasks. However, we need to understand that the hierarchy ends at the end of the workday when the person's in their home. There is no jurisdiction saying, if you do this, that, or whatever, we'll have some, squad of henchmen essentially go over to your home and, do violence on you, kidnap you, or whatever. These are the coercive systems I'm talking about that demand every second of your existence that you follow their standards. Now,
I do think that logically speaking, I think we could make a good argument for just logically. Now, practically is a different story because we have to implement it. But I think logically, through education, like you were talking about, I do think we could make the world a better place. I do think that if everybody on the planet understood, like I said before, if my neighbor is living his best life and has his freedom and well-being, which he needs to live his best life, the chances of him needing to do shitty things to be happy are very, very minimal, which means I'm going to be living my best life. So the best thing I can do for my own happiness is to make a reasonable investment in your happiness. That's selfish to a certain degree, right? Because ultimately I want to live my best life. It requires respect for the planet, respect for others, and self-respect, and you build up from there. And we could have small government, very small government at that point, right? The only reason the government might be kind of big is because one government, if we did this on a global scale, could literally just help everybody on the planet. Look, where do we want to build a bridge over in Norway? Let's get a community of people together who want to go build a bridge in Norway. Let's go build farmland, and let's do a aqua system down in Africa to help these people. Let's go, we could work all together. That's what I'd love to see happen. And I think relatively speaking, we could have a small government, a small system in place to take care of these things. But to say we need no system, we need no hierarchy, to me, that's just it makes no sense. It's incoherent. I don't understand how somebody could make that claim.
The hierarchy cannot be coercive. The hierarchy needs to be based in competency and intelligence and who is the most moral. And it needs to have a clear endpoint instead of just perpetuating every second of your life.
Well, I love what you're saying about checks and balances. And I'd love to find common ground with people. And I think that I could definitely find common ground with you there. I think the reason that every system, like we talked about before we got here, we were talking about capitalism versus socialism. And I think the one thing that everybody agreed on here is that the issue really comes down to corruption, that we could screw up any system with corruption. And that's what's been happening. And corruption can only happen if we don't have the right checks and balances, right?
Yeah, set sales. I think the problem is that you're talking about creating a world where everyone is basically their own authority. I mean, that's exactly why we need systems of force, because some people are going to use their self-sovereignty to violate the well-being of others. So we need a universal code in place that describes what happens to people when they do things like this, and who's going to enforce it. Well, it can't be the people doing the crime. It's got to be somebody. You want to create this fairy tale world where everyone's just using their authority and their sovereignty to be the best. Well, that's not
what I'm saying. I'm talking about a world where everyone is basically the immune system is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about taking responsibility for your actions and how you interact in the world and respecting others. And that means holding them accountable to the same standards that you would hold yourself to. Okay.
Yeah, right.
If that means, someone's out there doing all these bad things that are bad because they directly interfere with and prohibit other sovereign beings from expressing themselves in the objective world, it is your right and maybe even moral duty, one could say, to go out and stop them by any means necessary. That's not what I'm saying. What people who want government are basically saying is, I don't want to have to do this. I want cops to do it for me. I want judges to judge these people for me. I don't want these responsibilities. But at the same time, they forget that these systems are made up of people. And it's not like these people are going to go away, the cops or whatever. It's just that they're not going to be cops anymore. They're perfectly capable of going out and stopping bad people just because they're not cops. Just because they're cops does not magically make them more competent, more capable, or more suitable than
it actually does. They're trained
it actually
to do that
does.
job. No, because because not everyone has time.
Please don't cite police officer training as competency, because it's really not.
Yeah.
No, special forces is good.
Have you ever been a cop?
I don't need to be a cop.
I personally know 2 cops, and I'm not going to sit here and argue cops are drawn from the absolute highest echelon, but they do receive training that makes them much better at what they do than the average person, and much more likely.
IQ limits.
Like what?
They have IQ limits. They don't want people above a 125 IQ joining the police force. They don't want moral agents. They want order followers. Cops are not good people. They're not qualified people.
Wow.
Cops are, yeah.
Wow.
There's no way. I don't see as a Christian how you could say cops are good people when literally Jesus Christ was murdered by a cop, a Roman centurion of his day, who led centuries into battle.
Okay, just because there was one bad cop 2,000 years ago doesn't mean cops.
He wasn't even a bad cop after he experiences cognitive dissonance.
Do you know what the parts? Do you know what the parts in the whole fallacy is? Set scales. You can't judge every single thing off of one single part of it. You cannot say cops as a blanket statement are bad people. That
absolutely
can't. Demonstrably false.
It's actually not. If you I hate to tell you, but if you actually understood objective morality and the basis of what I said, you would understand instantly why cops are not moral. And if you actually trace their lineage in this country, they're basically they come from runaway slave patrols.
Oh gosh.
So that's an appeal to emotion, and it's also poisoning the well, and it's a bit of an ad hom. You're telling me I don't understand. Well, help me to understand then. Don't just say you understand.
So
I can see that.
I want to ask this question. Are you going to look at all the black cops in the United States and say, you're descended from people who chased slaves? Do you really think they're not going to just laugh at you and think you're the dumbest person they've ever interacted with? Like, I'm not calling you dumb, but come on, man. You act like all these cops, they have like whips in their hand, they're like riding on horseback. Do you realize, like, when I say I know 2 cops personally, like in my family, you know, not in my family, but people who are associated with my family and close friendships, like one of them's black. I mean, come on, dude. These people aren't like chasing slaves around and corralling them. It's silly.
What does it matter? This is an illogical argument. Just because they're black doesn't mean
Well,
that
because your comments about cops
that has nothing to do with the
I'll answer your question. Yeah, I'll answer your question because you made a comment about this trope about how modern policing is a descendant of, you know, in this country they used to chase, you know, the slaves escape and they would have to. That was the foundations of law enforcement in America. First of all, the foundation of law enforcement go back to literally the dawn of human history. Every society has quote unquote cops. You talked about a centurion, so the Romans had quote unquote cops. It's not based on hunting slaves. It's just silly, dude. It's just why would you even say something?
Because it's the truth, A's like
okay.
Just kind of talking around my point. Like you're not really addressing it. You're just saying, well, it's something every civilization has.
I guess my point
is that
modern policing has nothing to do with the slave trade. It's just, or the slave institution has nothing to do with that. It's no use even mentioning that nonsense. It really doesn't.
Again, you're still not addressing my point. You're talking besides the
What
point.
is your point? What is it exactly then? Why even bring up?
I've been saying the whole time, if you have someone who is appointed as a coercer or an enforcer of some arbitrary master who is declaring their laws, their mandates as standards that everyone else needs to follow, you are saying you don't actually have sovereign authority over yourself as an individual, and therefore you're basically declaring there is no objective morality. You're arguing for moral relativism based in secular humanism.
No, let me break it down. The thing is, I do believe in you know, people, not just me, but people do believe in objective morality. But there are people in society whose job it is, because of their training, to enforce that objective moral standard. Not everyone is equipped to do that because everyone's going about their lives. We need people whose literal job it is to make sure that people are following the rules. We do need law enforcement. We do need judges. And unfortunately, that will necessitate there will be some measure of corruption, but it's really inescapable until everyone embraces, you know, their obligation to do the right thing, which I think will come when people embrace Christ. But
you say it's inescapable, but why? Why is it inescapable? Because Adam and Eve ate the fruit, and now people need to accept Christ.
basically, we exist in an environment where we have to deal with the reality that people don't use their free will for the benefit of others in many cases. So we need a law enforcement structure in society that enforces the punishment or the corrective measure for when people do that. And you're just going to have this anarchist system where everyone's just enforcing whatever the rule they think is most important. It's like, no, there has to be a society, that a code that everyone agrees to, and there have to be people in society trained to enforce that code, or otherwise, you know, everyone's just going to be the law of the jungle, which is not going to be better than a system with law enforcement officers. It's
Sorry,
just not.
but what you're describing is the law of the jungle, because you're basically saying there needs to be this class of lions that keeps the rest of the sheep in line. That's basically what you just described. I'm saying that people, if educated properly, will have that so-called legal code written on their heart in the form of true objective morality, true standards, true principles.
Here's the thing, Sescales, you can, just because people know what's right and wrong, that's why they steal things at night. But do they follow? You can know the code, you can understand it, you can believe it exists, whatever. That doesn't mean you're following it. That's the problem. People aren't following it. Just knowing the code, understanding it, believing it exists as a real thing, It's only part of the solution. If people don't want to follow it, they're not going to. And then what do you do with them? You have to force them, or you have to forcibly prevent them from doing the wrong thing. And who does that? They're not going to do it to themselves, so it's going to have to be somebody else.
The militia. Are you familiar with the militia as described by the people who wrote the Second Amendment?
Yeah,
The
sure.
militia is everyone. The militia is everyone who's well regulated in arms. Well regulated means they know how to use their arms. It doesn't mean some arbitrary state regulating who gets to use what weapons. It means that the people have weapons commensurate to the centralized authority or the systems of the day, and they know how to use them. These are the people who will keep the bad people in check. It'll be everyone. We won't need some cops.
You know, Seth Scales, I remember I asked you, when in history has any society done what you think, and you said it's never happened. And don't you think that's kind of a sign that your ideas don't work? Don't you think if there was some brilliant idea that was going to solve all society problems, someone would have at least tried it by now? But no one has. Doesn't that make you feel like maybe it's just because it's a terrible idea?
Well, I should say no one's done exactly what I'm saying, but people have lived peacefully, but perfectly symbiotic relationship with the environment and their neighbors before civilization existed.
What evidence do you have of that?
Well, first of all, it's described in every mythology as golden ages, and it's described in Aboriginal teachings. We could see how the Aboriginals continue to live to this day. They live in egalitarian-based societies where coercion is based in a system designed to basically limit who's getting what resources. This is what egalitarian systems were designed around. It was designed to punish people who were more ambitious, seeking more resources than would be necessary for them as an individual. They did this through things like shame. They did this through things like forced resource allocation. And what I'm saying is we need to find a way to balance what these egalitarian societies did, what every mythology is screaming about, a golden age that they say happened, with our modern technology through non-coercive, decentralized systems.
And what evidence? So you're saying it was a golden age. Do you have any kind of source on that? Because I've studied a lot of religions over the years, a lot of religions, and I've never heard a single religion claim that there was this time, other than in mythology, where they say
in the Bible. What are you talking about? It's talking about man lived an innocent, peaceful existence with nature. This is the foundation of every myth and religion.
No, this is certainly not the myth of every single religion. Corruption is the nature of the reality that we live in. Now, some religions say that we were brought this corruption onto ourselves because of this sin nature. Other religions and other mythologies or say that it was because that nature's chaotic. I mean, I'm not aware of a single religion that you're talking about. I know Egyptology does not say this. None of the Abrahamic faiths say this. Greco-Roman, the Greeks mythology does not say this. Hinduism does not say this. Buddhism does not say this. Taoism does not say this. I can't think of it. Zoroastrianism does not say this. So what religion are you talking? You mentioned Aboriginal tribes did this. I guarantee you the Aboriginal tribes were extremely misogynistic and coerced the women into filling specific roles, which made them breeders. So there's definitely coercion there.
Did you just say I guarantee?
Tell me a source. Give me a source.
I just gave you one.
Which one?
You dismissed it. I just told you the Bible, and then you just
the Bible does not. The Bible starts with the Adam and Eve story.
Exactly what I just described. Mankind,
the naked lady ate the magic fruit because the talking snake told her to. That was born in their nature.
Source. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. It's clearly not in their nature because the serpent is separate from God.
And the God created the serpent. God put the nature of sin into the environment by putting the serpent there.
God did not intend for the serpent to talk to man in the way he did, unless you want to believe
that doesn't hold up to the story. An all-knowing God, which is alluded to in the Bible, knows exactly what the serpent is capable of. That's like saying, I'm going to build a race car and not put the brakes on it and not take any responsibility for any accidents that happen in that car. I didn't know. Not my fault. So I'm not the one driving it. It's nonsensical when people try to pass the blame off.
I would really like to see Set Scales and a bunch of his buddies try to form this magical, peaceful harmony society somewhere. Like,
Yeah,
I
where they
say
don't
give
where they don't have cops, but they've got an armed militia.
no, I want to say this. I say let's give them like a piece of land. I don't know, maybe like a few hundred acres, and let them have it. Let's see if the society really functions the way I'd like to see it happen. I really would.
Well, I would say the same thing to the brother is that if you have this idea, right, then you don't have the evidence because you haven't given me a source yet. And you don't have a valid argument that leads to a sound conclusion. I've pointed out, I think, 3 or 4 fallacies that you've already committed, and you haven't gotten around any of those. You continue to use the word arbitrary incorrectly. I don't even think you know what that word means. And I'm not trying to be mean to you right now, but you've not applied that word correctly yet.
Yes, I have. I'm calling the systems of coercion arbitrary. They are entirely arbitrary and illegitimate.
Well, to be fair, I remember Daniel said arbitrary means without reason. So the systems have
based on random choice or personal whim rather than any reason or system.
Mike just cut out.
You're literally contradicting yourself by saying that it's an arbitrary system. It's literally contradictory to the definition of the word itself. I just read you the definition.
Your mic cut out.
I just read you the definition. I'll do it again. Based on random choice or personal whim rather than any reason or system. And you continue to say arbitrary system. So you are refuting yourself. You don't know what the word means. You continue to misuse it.
No, I don't. In fact, whims is exactly all politicians do and act.
It's not
on.
whims. They have reasons. Their reasons are selfishness, corruption,
if
ignorance.
it was a legitimate system, there would be no need to go and continuously change it.
Because saying arbitrary system is a contradiction. It's self-refuting. It can't be an arbitrary system.
It's arbitrary because it's not based in nature. It's based in man's whims and our imagination of what we think nature should be. That's why it's arbitrary.
Based on a whim. It's based on reason.
It's based on the reasons that man think nature should be according to.
And it's not arbitrary. And it's not arbitrary if you've said arbitrary systems
have nothing to do with nature.
Brother, you've said arbitrary systems probably half a dozen times at least.
Okay, well, you guys should go back and listen to yourselves as well. You know, you guys can continuously just sidestep what I'm saying. Okay, I've explained the Bible is describing a time before a reset when man was in perfect symbiotic relationship with its environment, and there was a corrupted code that forced us down this unnatural path. This is described in every mythology. Yes, it is. This is the foundation of everything.
The Bible doesn't even say this. The Bible says the Garden of Eden was where 2 people lived, and that didn't last very long.
I think let me try to see what says. I think what he's trying to say is in the Garden of Eden for a short period of time.
With 2 people, and that even got corrupted because God put the snake
for a
there.
long time, actually.
How do you know how long it was? Because it doesn't tell us. It literally says that God went from naming the animals to then Eve getting tempted.
Because we have to understand that the Bible is based off older texts and see where they're coming from.
I am aware the Bible is based off of older texts.
I know you are. So that's why we don't need to limit ourselves to just the Bible.
But you said it's in the Bible. So then cite the older text and don't cite the Bible.
Yeah, the Enuma Elish describes a war basically between the gods and the forces of nature, and they split heaven and earth.
Yeah, it's called
the boundary. And the boundary is the
I'm familiar with that. Yeah, it also talks about.
So as that, I'm telling you how it translates to Genesis. The monsters of Tiamat and her army are basically how civilization frames humanity as they existed before civilization came into being. So that way they have a mythology which justifies their city-states. This is the foundational myth of civilization. It's basically just designed to create a docile worker within a system designed to extract their labor for a ruling class that is completely disassociated from said labor. This is This is what the Bible's describing. It's describing people who lived in nature. It doesn't describe them as monsters. It describes them as Adam and Eve living in the Garden of Eden, living a symbiotic relationship with nature, who were corrupted by the serpents. And then now they go down this path of misery and trauma because now they're basically designated to be slaves and laborers for God.
All right. I know that we are probably not totally finished with this conversation, but we are actually at a time where I'm basically going to have to stop just because of time limitations. So I want to thank you both for participating. Again, I know that, there's a lot left on the table, but it's going to have to be for another time, which I plan on, setting up at some point. So for now, we usually do closing statements. You can, plug your channel, but try to keep it to like, 2 minutes or so. And we go in reverse order when people join. So start with Set Scales, then OE, and then I will close things down. Set Scales.
Cool talking to you guys. I think me and OE are on the same page. The only real difference is that I think that objective morality has its basis in God, and he seems to think it has a foundation in some sort of materialist or secularist base. I don't know, something like that. And that's really it. It was good talking to you guys. I'll probably come on again.
Yeah, it's always
All
good
right.
to see Set Scales. I do appreciate that you have actually read other texts and stuff like that, looked into other religions. A lot of people haven't, so they don't understand a lot of these origin stories. And I do enjoy that when you and I can get to talk about that stuff. And I appreciate that you understand the morality is objective. If you base it in God, I don't think you can get objective morality, but that's a conversation we can have another time. But at least we both agree on freedom and well-being, agency, equality, living symbiotically with nature. I think is the key to everything. Really, I would absolutely agree with you there. So it's good to see you.
All right, Set Scales. Until next time. Thank you. All right, OE, you're next.
Yeah, there was so much to unpack there. The conversation started in politics, and I normally, for those of you who know me, I rarely get into those kind of conversations. I do have a channel. It's at Objective Ethics on YouTube. I think I just hit 300 subscribers, so the channel is growing so fast. I'm just shocked. I do hope that Ace and I can get together and have a conversation, specifically talking about some of maybe the LGBTQ stuff that we talked about, because there was a lot left on the table there. As far as the politics go, I think that we really uncovered a lot of great information, and we had a really respectful dialogue. And even though it sounded like Set Scales and I were getting a little heated with each other, I don't think that was the case. We were just getting warmed up, But I do respect him as a human being. I don't agree with, a lot of his positions. I definitely don't agree with the anarchist position. As I said, every single anarchy that's ever risen up just rebuilds a new system. So anarchy can't be the solution. I think that we need hierarchies. I think that we need certain systems and regulations for bridge building, for example. We need police officers, and I think we need good police officers. There is definitely a problem with bad police officers, and that shouldn't be just swept under the rug. We need to deal with that problem, though. But just to vilify all police officers, I think is just unfair and frankly, just really disrespectful and inconsiderate, because I think the majority of people who serve in the police department, just like the fire department or whatever else, are trying to serve their community and make society a safer place for everybody. And so I just think that police officers in general should get some respect for that. Now, again, I'm not saying that there aren't bad cops and we don't want to tolerate bad policing, but we do need to understand that just because there's some bad cops out there doesn't mean that every single police officer is a bad person. There were a number of fallacies there at the end that I pointed out that never got addressed. I would encourage Set Scales to really go back and rewatch this video, because he used the term arbitrary system so many times. And as I read the definition of arbitrary, there cannot be an arbitrary system. That's self-refuting. The parts in the whole fallacy, the appeal to emotion, just so much that was going on there. So I think if he could put together a valid argument that leads to a sound conclusion, if he could actually get some source material that, some citations, what he's talking about, some of this, everybody living symbiotic with nature, where it happened and where we have evidence of this, that would really go a long way for his argument. But I think at the root of it all, I agree with him. I think if we do need to learn to live symbiotically with the planet, you guys have heard me, if you've watched my channel at all, you've heard me say 1,000 times that the key to living a good life starts with respect for the planet, respect for each other, and self-respect. Thank you for having me, Ace.
All right, yeah, I was agreeing with a lot of the stuff you were saying, and absolutely, there is ground for future conversations. So everyone head over to Objective Ethics channel, subscribe. He's got some interesting content on there. So thank you for being here, OE.
Always a pleasure, brother. I look forward to our next conversation, as always. I'm going to use this video, if you don't mind, maybe at some point, because I'd like to. I thought it was a really good conversation, to be honest with you. I thought there was a lot of really good points made. All right, brother.
Yeah,
I'll talk to you.
Go ahead. Go ahead. All right, peace. All right, let me share my screen just to show the original kind of ideas. I think this is my first foray into political discussions. Again, I have strong opinions in politics, not like party politics, but just the idea of what are the best ideas for how society should be run. And there's a number of areas I could address from the conversation that we had today. First of all, as far as anarchy is concerned, I agree with OE. It's just that the founding fathers of America called government a necessary evil, and that's exactly what it is. I mean, it doesn't have to be evil, but basically, it's something that in an ideal world it wouldn't exist the way it does now in a coercive manner. But because there are people who use their free will to violate the rights and freedoms and of other individuals in society, we do need governments. And my opinion is that conservatism and the ideas of limited laissez-faire government are the best ones, because the whole idea is to limit government to its minimal functioning capacity, and everything else should be based on free exchanges. So you ask yourself, what is the smallest, least interventionist type of government that we can create that basically just establishes, a basic system of laws and codes and enforces that, and that's all it does. And that's actually the constitutional system that was created for the United States. It's grown into this monstrosity, but if you read the founding fathers, they actually tried to create that kind of government. And if you read the Constitution of the United States, its entire purpose is to limit the power and scope of government to its minimal functions. Like, go ahead and read that history. The Constitution of the United States limits the power of government. It doesn't create a government the original purpose of the government wasn't to basically micromanage everything in society. It was to do a specific number of very important core functions and leave everything else to basically individual expression. But over time, progressive ideology has transformed the government into this monstrosity that controls literally every aspect of our lives, and there's no escape from it, including the taxation rates we were talking about earlier, which for any person to have 37% of their base earnings taken directly out and sent to the government is horrendous. So going back to the ideas of wealth inequality, in my opinion, it's very simple. Inequality will always exist because it doesn't always have to do with the system. It has to, in many cases, it can be a result of individual effort. You can imagine a field with a bunch of apple trees in it. And, you have two people with, buckets in their hands or some buckets. And you can imagine a scenario where imagine an apple or something you can live off of. Well, the person who exerts the most effort, walks through the field, does the most work, maybe even trains in apple picking and things like that, is going to get a lot more apples than the guy who kind of, sits on the side and kind of takes a nap and maybe is, doing some mind altering substances and things like that. and basically not working very hard. At the end of the day, you're going to have the two people come back. One guy is going to have a lot more apples in his bucket than the other guy, and that's, oh, there's inequality. Even though they both had the same field and unlimited number of apples, they both had the same buckets, the same everything. They're going to exert their talents and their efforts differently, and that's going to result in inequality. And maybe one of the guys develops a machine that can harvest apples quicker. He did that. He used his intelligence to create a system. So inequality is always going to be there, even a completely fair system. The idea of capping wealth, I think, is just a horribly destructive idea, just because it's inherently unethical. Because what are you doing? You're basically saying that someone, let's $100 million. What you're basically saying is that as a society, if you earn that $101, we're just going to take it from you. Well, that's effectively stealing, but thou shalt not steal. So you can't steal somebody's money. You have to encourage them to be generous with it or do something else. And honestly, I don't know why that happens, Set Scales. I have no idea why. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it just happens where the avatar doesn't show. I don't change that. I don't do anything, and I don't know how to fix it. So I think it has to do with you. I think it has a little bit to do with your connection or StreamYard. Yeah, it was showing earlier, but then it dropped out later. So sometimes that kind of stuff happens. In the StreamYard, it shows, but on the Yahoo side and the YouTube side, it doesn't. So I don't. It's right. It's on the replay, it won't show. I do not know why that happens, but I certainly did not do anything to create that situation. It comes and goes. You'll notice it'll happen sometimes. I don't know what causes it to happen or why it happens, but it does happen from time to time. And I think it has something to do with the connectivity and StreamYard and all that. But I really hope I didn't do anything to change it, truthfully. And here's the thing. I argue against communism and Marxism and really socialism in general. But the truth is that every system can work, including communism, if everyone in society is agreeing and working and being ethical all the time, which is the purpose of Christianity, in my opinion. The purpose of Christianity is that you aren't being forced to be generous by some state or some democratically elected group of people. Even people are being generous because they generally love their fellow neighbor and citizens and want to help them. And that's what Christ encouraged. So that's why I do see Christianity as a solution, is because it's not a system of taxation and forced theft and government theft, as some people view it. It's a system or an idea where people are being generous with what they have naturally and willfully, as opposed to forced generosity of socialism and things like that. And these corrupt politicians trying to win elections and enrich themselves by talking about how much they want to help people and tax the rich and tax the corporations. And the money never ends up in the hands of the people at the end of the day. So we need a system that basically encourages people to do the right thing inherently. It's not coercive, like Set Scales was talking about. And to me, Christianity does that. It says that God is the one demanding that you be a good person and do good works and do what's best for society. But people want to attack Christianity for these other reasons, say it's unethical. Well, you're attacking a system that basically builds the very world you want to create, in my opinion. And we can have that conversation. There are obviously criticisms about the entire text, the Bible, and all the moral commandments, whether they're all fit together. And those are obviously conversations that we'll maybe continue to have, because it looks like we were getting into that in this one as well. Anyways, I appreciate everyone who participated. I appreciate everyone who was, watched, like, and subscribe. And maybe I think we'll have more political discussions in the future. All right. God bless. Until next time.